All right, looks like we are live on Standing for Truth. My name is Donny, and I am your host and moderator for tonight's epic evolution open mic. We have the evolutionist's worst nightmare, the man himself, the undefeated champ, Dr. Dino, to take on all of the evolutionists for this open mic challenge. I also have my award-winning co-host here, Sam, who will be acting as co-mod for tonight's discussion. Sam, how you doing tonight, brother?
Doing good. Thanks for having me on. And pleasure to be here. So I'm honored. Kent, nice to see you again. Looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to it as well. Kent, after 320 debates, is it true that you still don't believe you're related to strawberries?
I do not, brother. I believe the Bible is literally true and scientifically accurate. God made everything in 6 days. They have always brought forth after their kind. Strawberries make baby strawberries only, and humans make baby humans only. People who believe they're related are certifiably insane, in my humble opinion.
Amen. I completely agree. And that's what this open mic debate night is all about. For anybody who does believe that they are related to strawberries and banana plants, and you would like us to believe that same thing, please feel free to click the link that I will post in about 15 minutes. And we are going to have some impromptu debate. We're going to try and keep it on topic. We're going to try and keep it to one topic at a time and make sure that we're having an equally timed discussion. And so before we get into that portion of tonight, though, Kent, myself, and Sam, we're just going to engage some arguments for evolution from BioLogos. And I've got an article. Actually, before I pull up the article, Kent, how you doing tonight? And is there anything you wanted to say in terms of introduction first?
Well, we've been having a blast here at Dinosaur Adventureland in Lenox, Alabama. Come on down. We give tours all the time. It's amazing watching lives get changed and people get saved. And our science center teaches real science. You know, God made the world instead of the stupid evolution religion. So, yeah, come on down. It's all free. We have visitors coming all the time from everywhere.
And you just finished your 2023 boot camp, which was a lot of fun. Lots of great presentations there. Kent, speak to the Making Babies series. One thing that I've noticed is the evolutionists have been rather silent in responding to your Making Babies series. You've put out a challenge to them, isn't that right?
That is correct. I've been going through different creatures and asking simple question. How did this method of reproduction that they have, I'll do one tomorrow night on the Komodo dragon, they're not answering any of the questions. They claim they believe in evolution and things can be answered, you know, scientifically. Okay, how did it happen? The way these different creatures make babies. I'd like to know how this evolved. Give me some science and not just a story, you know, long ago and far away fairy tale stuff. So I've been going through a whole bunch of different animals and asking them the simple question, guys, how did this evolve? So far, they've been just real quiet. It's funny to watch. I love watching it. They're quiet. I got a whole list of all the animals I've been through. Let's see, the anglerfish, the tardigrade, the honeybee, the watermelon, the starfish. Just, guys, how did this method of reproduction evolve? And they haven't answered a single one. The frog, there's a frog that gives birth out of its mouth. Another one gives birth out of its back. How did this evolve? The ant, I went through the reproductive process for the ant, the starfish, the flatworm, the seahorse, the eel, the goby, the mannequins, the sharks. The reason I chose this is because I know full well, there is no scientific way this could have evolved. It's pure imagination to believe in evolution, and they have a vivid imagination. You gotta admit, I wish I had the faith that they had, but I don't admire what it's faith in. So tomorrow night, Making Babies, atheists all invited. We're going to explain how the Komodo dragon makes babies, and I'd like to hear a scientific explanation for how this evolved from a rock slowly over billions of years.
Great challenge. I appreciate it, Kent. I've already got people backstage waiting to come in, and so I posted the link just about 10 seconds ago. So for anybody that wants to join, whether you've got a question for Kent feel free to click the link as well, or you want to join to engage the challenge tonight, Evidence for Evolution, feel free to click the link as well. We're going to spend about the next 15 minutes or so, max 15 minutes, responding to an article here, and then we're going to start bringing people in for some fun. So I'm excited for this. Okay, Kent, here we go. I'm going to share screen. And for a little context, BioLogos is a well-known theistic evolution organization. And so they do claim to be Christian, but they hold to evolution by common descent as the means to how God basically brought forth life. And so in this article, they put forth what they believe are some of the best lines of evidence for evolution. The first line that I want to read and get your response to, Ken, is they point out in the introduction here, evolution is a scientific theory supported by an overwhelming amount of evidence. What are your thoughts on that sentence?
Well, I would say they would need to define what they mean by evolution, first of all, because we can't have a discussion on this unless we know what we're talking about. That's why I start off mine saying there are 6 different levels or stages to evolution: cosmic evolution, chemical evolution, stellar evolution. There is no evidence for evolution unless you mean variations within the same kind. There are 339 breeds of dogs. Are they calling that evolution? Is that evidence dogs are related to pine trees? See, the word evolution is too slippery. You have to nail it down and define it. What exactly do you mean? If they mean dogs are related to dogs in different kinds, yes. Dogs and wolves, yes, had a common ancestor. Dogs and bananas, no. But see, this first couple words are just too slippery. What exactly? And then just for them to claim it's a scientific theory with overwhelming evidence, well, that's a mantra. That's not science. Show me this evidence. I've been asking for it for years. There is no evidence whatsoever for evolution. It is a religion. They believe it happened long ago and far away. It's a fairy tale and nothing else. Tell them all I said so.
Right. As creationists, Kent, we're not scared of change. So if by evolution you mean change over time, and therefore all dogs are related, they go back to a common archetype, let's say 4,500 years ago, then sure. But if by evolution you mean dogs, wolves, and banana plants are related through common ancestry, that's where we have a problem, right, Kent?
That is where it's not science. They make these family trees, which are pure propaganda. I think I would agree that all the dogs in the world might have had a common ancestor. That does not prove dogs are related to bananas, which is what they claim. Look at their family trees. They've got the humans and the birds going back to a common ancestor, and the reptiles and the ladybugs and the pine trees, all going back, and the worms to a common ancestor. This is not science. This is propaganda. This is stupid. Tell them I said so, okay?
Okay, I appreciate it, Ken. All right, let's go to the next sentence here, because I find this interesting. So they say some Christians fear that accepting. So notice how they like to throw in the word accept rather than believe, right? The theory means rejecting God as creator. Is that true, Kent?
I'll accept anything that is true. Show me the truth, I will accept it. I accept the facts that cows can jump. I've got a video of a cow jumping over a 6-foot fence. I accept that. Therefore, if you give the cow vitamins, someday it could jump over the moon. That's their theory. Well, we see it can jump over a fence. Why not over the moon? If you give it more time. Well, we see the variations of dogs. Why not make them all come from an amoeba? Oh, if enough time. This is where they don't even see themselves. They have accepted a stupid religion, and I will accept any truth. You show me the scientific evidence, I will accept it. Nobody has shown any evidence of any animal ever in the history of the world producing anything other than what any 4-year-old would consider the same kind. God said they'd bring forth after their kind. The strawberries have been making baby strawberries since the beginning. Cows have been making baby cows. No exceptions, none. So it doesn't happen. I will accept the truth anytime. You show me the truth, I'll accept it. You show me the fact that all the mammals have 2 bones in the forelimb, I accept that. But then you want me to believe that means they're related? No. I don't accept that. I accept the fact they've got similar bones in the forelimb. I accept that. But I think that means they got a common designer. I don't think it means they got a common ancestor. Why would I want to believe that? Nobody's ever seen a squirrel produce a non-squirrel. It just doesn't happen, only in their imagination. But these family trees show all of them going back to a common ancestor. This is pure propaganda. I'm saddened that they chose to believe that. I'm real sad they want to make everybody pay to teach that to the kids in the public school. I will accept the fact they have won the battle of getting their religion into our schools exclusively. They have won so far. However, they're never going to win over all the students. I'm going to reach as many as I can with my little ministry and hope a million more start ministries. I hope students get in school and the teacher says, do you believe you're related to a strawberry? And they show a family tree. And the kid will say, well, teacher, the textbook says we are. And I'll answer that way on the test for you, but I don't believe it for a second. I think that's stupid, teacher.
Right. Well said. It's an extrapolation fallacy. They want to take these micro evolutionary variations that we see within different kinds of creatures and extrapolate that to mean all life, including plants and animals, are related through common ancestry. And that's not scientific, as you've pointed out, Kent. And so let's have a look at what they put forth as lines of evidence for why evolution is true. And so you kind of just touched on this one, Kent. They point to forms and structures as evidence for evolution by common descent. And so here they say, when we examine the bodies of today's animals in detail, we find remarkable similarities. For example, the skeletons of four-limbed creatures, what scientists call tetrapods, are only slight variations on the same body plan. The bones are longer in some animals, and in others they are fused together, but they are arranged in the same pattern. And so basically they're looking to the homologous patterns that we see in the biological world. What's a good response to this argument, Ken?
They are absolutely correct that there are many similarities, homologous, homo meaning same. There are homologous patterns in the creatures. They are correct. They are wrong to say that proves a common ancestor. They should be obviously saying the same guy designed them. I bet there are a lot of similarities between all the different products coming out of the assembly line at General Motors. I bet most of the cars and trucks have four wheels and they're round. I accept that. Does that prove something? Same guys are building them. It's a common design that works well. I accept the fact that most of the vehicles coming out of GM have the front wheels that turn so you can steer. Wow. And you turn one wheel and it turns both of them on the ground. Whoa, that's a cool idea. I accept that. Does that prove they all evolved from a skateboard? No. They're seeing something that is true, obvious. Yes, there are similarities. And coming to the totally wrong conclusion. I covered that last night on our channel on Genesis Baptist Church on YouTube. Get the program we did last night on this very topic about homologous arguments. It is not evidence for evolution. And that's the best one they've got. And it's real stupid to say that proves evolution.
It really is the most common argument that they've been using for the last 50 years. Human engineers and designers build in homologous patterns. And so why wouldn't God?
Right.
It doesn't prove to common ancestry. Sam, what are your thoughts? Do you think homology demonstrates that you are related to a ladybug?
Yeah, I think
Absolutely
it's just pure conjecture. I mean, how many things have a wheel? A lot of things have a wheel. It doesn't mean they're related, like Ken said. A unicycle, a bicycle, a tricycle. That's not proof of evolution.
Amen. I'd love to know why if evolution is true, why are there similarities at all? If we've been evolving for millions of years and we share common ancestors with the chimpanzees and lemurs and dogs and fish, well, that's millions of years of mutation accumulation in these regions of the genome. There shouldn't be any similarities at all. I believe it was a creationist who predicted similarities, and that's what we found. So similarities in structure, form, genetics are not evidence for evolution. So, okay, the next line of evidence that they point to, Kent, here at the bottom, looks like it's going to be vestigial traits. So we'll work through this a little bit. They say we can also look at the bodies of animals today and find features that are similar to what other animals have, but which no longer seem to function. or have different functions, they say. Scientists call these vestigial traits. Some classic examples are non-functioning eyes in blind cavefish, the hip bones on whales, and leg bones buried in the muscles of some snakes. Looks like they also point here to the appendix, wisdom teeth, goosebumps, and many other features. Kent, if you'd like to speak to this for a little bit.
I would say all these examples they give are examples of losing something, not gaining something. And many have been proven to not be vestigial at all. Man, 150 years ago, they had 180, I think, vestigial organs. They said, you don't need your tonsils, take them out. You don't need your adenoids, take them out. You don't need your appendix, take it out. The fact was they didn't know the function of it. That's all. Tell you what, put a 7-year-old under the hood of your car and say, take out everything it doesn't need. See what you got left. He simply doesn't know what they do, that's all. And what we've got is a bunch of 5-year-olds looking at the human body saying, wow, you don't need that, you don't need that. Even if it's true there's something that no longer works. We are a copy of our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents. There's likely some things that don't work well anymore. They've been copied, the gene code's been copied so many times. There's a possibility of something we've lost function. No, I don't question that. But does that prove, that doesn't prove how we got it. This is exactly the opposite of what they need for evidence for evolution. There is no evidence of gaining something. How could vestigial structures be any proof for their theory at all? So it's not. I totally disagree. Okay?
Great points. It's all degeneration from a once perfect creation. We're not seeing that type of change that fish to fisherman evolution would require. So the next line of evidence, one of your favorites, Kent, the good old fossil record. And so they argue here, the fossil record reveals intermediate species. And so they say underneath their headline here, if the theory of evolution is correct in its claim that today's animals can be traced back to common ancestors in the past, it is reasonable to expect that there should be some record of these ancestors in the fossil record. It is often claimed by those who deny evolution that no intermediate fossils have ever been found that support the theory's claims. This just isn't true. Fossils can't prove that one species evolved from another, but when we find a succession of them over time with slight modifications, it is difficult to deny the appearance of evolution. Thoughts, Kent?
Well, I start off, I say, stop, guys. There is no such thing as a fossil record. There are lots of fossils. Now, that I would agree with. I think that's evidence of a flood, rapid burial. How many fossils are forming today from animals that died? None that we know of. Nobody sees it happening today. There's not a problem finding fossils. Fossils exist by the trillions. When you find a fossil clam in the closed position, you should notice it doesn't talk. And it doesn't have a date stamped on it. All you really know is it died. You don't know it had any children. You sure don't know it had different children. Why would we think a bone from the dirt or a fossil from the dirt would do something that no animal today can do? No clam can make anything except baby clams. It's all we've ever seen. Clams make baby clams. If you wish to believe this is the ancestor of a bird, well, go ahead and believe whatever you want, but don't teach that in public school. That's not science. So I object. There's no such thing as a fossil record. I would admit there are fossils, trillions of them. I admit there are some that look halfway between different living things, but so are some animals today that look halfway between different living things. Well, they only produce after their kind. That's real science says evolution says animals produce after their kind. So, like I said, they're making a statement of their faith. I wish if they mean by BioLogos, talking about logos as in the Word of God, I wish they'd quit blaming God for their stupid religion.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Again, human engineers, human designers build interesting vehicles that are mosaics. Look at the crossover SUVs or your military amphibious assault vehicles. They blend the features of a tank and something built for the sea. It's good design. And so why wouldn't God do the same? And if they find a creature in the fossil record that, like you mentioned, Kent, that seems to blend the features of two different organisms. Today, we have interesting mosaics like the platypus, right? Isn't that just evidence of a type of creature in the past that went extinct. It doesn't prove that they evolved into anything else.
Right. Extinction also would be the opposite of evolution. There's something went extinct. Yeah. I bet you could find most people that have owned a car for, say, 10 or 15 years. Some things quit working. Maybe the radio doesn't work anymore. Still got the radio in there, it doesn't work. Maybe, I don't know, different things to quit working. Again, that's not how they got the things. So they're giving no evidence. That's not evidence for evolution at all. Why would they put that in their list of evidences for their religion? It's not evidence.
Yeah.
So
great points. Great points. Okay, so their next line of evidence here is biogeography. They say biogeography was predicted by evolution. And so they argue the theory of evolution predicts patterns of species, not just over time in the fossil record, but also in the distribution of species today around the earth, the study of which is called biogeography. The differences between species on islands compared to mainlands provide a compelling example of evolution, because islands provide isolated habitats where there is little chance of interbreeding with mainland species. Evolutionary theory predicts that differences will accumulate and new species will evolve. Kent, what are your thoughts? Do you believe biogeography is good evidence for universal common ancestry?
well, they have way too many fuzzy words in their description there. What exactly is a species? Okay. I think if you isolated all the dogs in the world up in Alaska, take them all up there. Please take my wife's pug with that group. Drop them all off in Alaska. Come back in 5 years. You would find only dogs left alive that have thick fur, like a wolf, and that are more aggressive, like a wolf. They got to go after their food. You would not find the thin fur, small, short. You wouldn't find any Chihuahuas at all after 5 years. So I think nature can select, and the geology of an area, i.e. cold weather, for instance, in Alaska, will certainly select certain body types to survive. Others are going to freeze to death. And only those that live get to make babies. So I think that's an example of natural selection. Nature certainly does select. I don't argue that, but it doesn't create anything. It selects something that's already existing. There's natural selection and then artificial selection. Man has decided to select certain kinds of cows because they give more milk. You got a picture of the world's record milk producer, 185 pounds of milk every day. The poor thing can barely walk. It would never survive in the woods, but it does produce a lot of milk. Okay. They didn't create anything. They artificially selected one trait that cows already had and emphasized it. You think you'll ever get a cow that'll give 4 trillion tons of milk a day? I think there's a limit. Is 185 pounds a day the limit? I don't know, probably getting close. They're not going to get 4 trillion tons though. Atheists, they don't understand this, let alone admit it. Variations happen, but they're limited. They see 300 breeds of dogs and think dogs came from an amoeba. There's certain kinds of stupidity are not fixable, I guess. I think that's one of them.
All right, Kent, I appreciate the response. Okay, we got one final line of evidence that BioLogos has provided as to why we should believe we're related to strawberries. Very convincing lines of evidence, eh, Kent? Apparently this is the best they got. And before we get to this final argument from BioLogos, I see a lot of people backstage. We got Atheist Jr. We've got an evolutionist named Doc, like Jackson Rowe. And so this is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to go through this final argument here on this article, and then we're going to let the showdown begin, I guess you could say. I've also got the link posted in the chat for anybody else who would like to join the show, whether for debate or simply to ask some questions. So, okay, here's the final argument, Ken. They say genetics removes all reasonable doubt. The relationships between species inferred from biogeography, the fossil record, and the shapes and structures of animals today. So independently, you've refuted each one of these on their own. But they say that there's an even more impressive argument, and it's from genetics. And so they say, if we never find another fossil or vestigial trait, genetic evidence puts common ancestry beyond reasonable doubt. Every organism shares the same genetic code, and the pattern of shared genes we've recently discovered among species generally matches the relatedness we had concluded from the other kinds of evidence. Why don't we start with that, Dr. Dino? Shared genetic sequences in the biological world, they're saying, is evidence for common descent. What are your thoughts on that?
I think an awful lot of cars today have a great amount of computer control in the car someplace. They will have an engine light that comes on your dash because the computer says, oh, the gas cap isn't on tight. Make the light come on. Oh, you got a wheel that's low on air. Okay. There's probably, I don't know how many things go to that switch, would you guess? Who's my mechanics here? Lots of things go to that little light. Come on. There's a computer code telling, if this is wrong, turn this light on. So, check your engine, do something. I would say the computer code used by Chevy and Ford and Volkswagen and Honda and Toyota has probably got a lot of identical lines of code. Does that prove they're evolving? No. It's a common code that is used to accomplish the purpose. Turn this light on if the gas cap isn't tight. Check the air pressure in the tank, whatever. So I think there are lots of lines of code in Microsoft Word that are identical to Microsoft PowerPoint. When I go to my Microsoft PowerPoint spell check, I'd be willing to bet $2 it takes me to the exact same lines of code when I go to the spell check from my Microsoft Word. What does that prove? The same guys are writing the code. And I think if a strawberry has a code, a genetic code, to tell it how to make a seed, there may be some lines of code that are identical telling the human how to make a seed. So the same guy wrote the code. This code is so complex, it's mind-boggling in its complexity. All the computer codes written by man in the history of humanity don't equal up to the code written in one seed to make a sperm and an egg and make a human. All the codes together in the world do not equal that. And they wish to believe it came by chance. I'm sorry. Genetic similarities proves a really smart designer.
Right. And earlier we were talking about the shared similarities between different modes of transportation. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, the underlying blueprint to these various vehicles would also share much similarities, whether it's GM, Chevy, Chrysler. Is that right, Kent?
I bet even the way that they're assembled would show some similarities. You probably start with the frame. I bet they build the body before they put the windshield in it.
Mm.
Right? I bet they put the windshield in before they put the windshield wipers on. I bet there's a similarity of assembly. I don't bring on the atheist, brother. I'll get my hammer, get some real science, get my SpongeBob. Hang on. And I've been trying for years to knock some sense into them. All you atheists, get ready. Okay, go ahead. Bring them on, brother.
Here we go. Let the showdown begin. So I'm excited for that. We went through the article on BioLogos. I appreciate it, Kent. And we are going to bring in our guests. And so we've got Atheist Junior. We've got Doc. We've got Jackson Rowe. So we'll start with the three for now. Obviously, we're gonna go one at a time, and I think this is going to be fun. Atheist Junior and Jackson Rowe have debated Kent in the past. Jackson, it's been a while. It's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you guys.
Hope you've been well. And then we've also got a newcomer, Doc, in the middle. So Doc, good to have you.
Yeah, howdy.
And AJ, good to have you. AJ was first here, and therefore, to be fair, we will start with AJ. And so, if you wanted to give yourself a brief intro for anybody who might not be familiar with you, AJ, and then we'll just kind of start it off with a question or a topic for Kent. We'll allow you guys to go back and forth a little bit on it.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I want to say thank you to Donny and Redefine Living for hosting, and Kent for coming on and taking the time. My channel is Atheist Junior. I do like response videos, mainly live streams. I responded to Kent a bunch of times and debated him. I've debated other creationists, and I do lots of fun videos like that. So you can check out my channel later if you want. Can I share my screen? Is that possible?
Sure.
Okay. Because I had an image that I wanted to show. Oh, is that possible?
Give it millions of years. Just give it millions of years. It'll evolve.
Maybe I can send you the link, Donnie. I'll ask a backup question then. So, Kent, I have a question. So why is it that you guys were talking about vestigial structures earlier, and it seems like you're using an outdated definition, because when you talk about vestigial structures, you say that it is something that has no function anymore, but that's really not the definition that I think is correct. Like on Google, it says vestigiality is the retention during the process of evolution of genetically determined structures or attributes that have lost some or all of the ancestral function in a given species. So the key word there would be some or all. So not all of their function is lost. It doesn't mean they're totally useless. So I'm just wondering why you seem to use this outdated definition.
Okay, I'm just wondering why you.
Kent, you cut out.
I thought I was frozen.
Yeah, so I guess we can ask, why would they need to change the definition? Is it possibly because at one point there were hundreds? Or Kent, you back?
Yeah, there were supposedly 180 vestigial structures. Whether they lost some or lost all, I don't see how you cannot see how silly your argument is. If they've lost some, how did they get? Let's say they've lost 20% of their function. Well, how did they evolve to get the 100% to start losing some? How can you lose part of a sight of an eyeball before you get an eyeball? If they've now changed the definition to add the word some, okay, I'll add the word some if that'll make it. It doesn't change my point at all. This is losing, not gaining. What new functions are you gaining, AJ? Is anybody gaining a new function? Is anybody starting to learn to fly, growing wings on their back, or anything? What are we gaining? You don't have any examples. So you're going to pick at a detail like that. I left out the word some in the new modern definition. It's still the same truth. They're losing, not gaining. Go ahead.
No, it totally changes the meaning, because if it still has some function, that's why the whale's hip bones are not completely useless. That's why they've gotten the function of, they can use the function of using them for reproduction, even if they had a different function in the whale's ancestor. But the argument that they're not vestigial because they have the use of reproduction, that new definition completely negates that argument, because you can't say, oh, it's not vestigial because it has this function that's for reproduction, because that's just a new function, because it didn't lose all of its functions. So It totally debunks that argument.
How do you know the whale had the ability to walk on land to begin with, to lose it? In your mind, you're thinking the whale used to walk on land, and those bones in the abdomen were used for walking, and now it switched over and used them for reproduction. You can't possibly know that. Nobody's ever seen any animal produce a different kind of creature. In your imagination, you believe they used to walk on land. Well, there's a lot of animals today that walk on land. Are any of them becoming whales? Are any of them starting to lose their limbs and turn them into... Oh, well, here's what we know. Science says we know the whales have those bones in their abdomen, and we know they use them for reproduction. That we know. Now, you can imagine, wow, they used to use them to walk. That's not science. You don't know that they lost part of their function and retained some of it. You just shared a great fairy tale with us. You didn't show us any science. How do you know the whale used to walk on land and it changed the function of the hip bones? You can't possibly know that. Go ahead.
I never claimed a whale could walk on land. I said the ancestor of whales was a tetrapod, a land-dwelling animal that had 4 limbs.
And how do you know that? Where's the evidence of that?
The fossil record.
The
there
fossil,
you go.
Georgia Cetus. Yeah.
Yeah, there is no such thing as a fossil record. There are fossils. You don't know that any of those fossils in any museum ever, including mine, had babies. We don't see any animal today.
We don't have to know that. Sorry, may I say something here?
Yeah, go ahead.
We don't have to know if they had children or not. A fossil is just representative of the population at the time. That's all it is. So that single fossil might not have had any children, but the others around it would have, and it had to have had parents. And as we go through the fossil record, we find this sequence of basal ungulates. So think of it like a deer with a wolf head, kind of. That's basically what Pachycetus is. Slowly transitioning towards greater and greater degrees of swimming. Like, we see this very gradual transition. We can also see it in genetic evidence. The DNA.
Well, I'm going to stop you there, Doc. I appreciate
sure.
those points. Let's stick with those. You pointed out that it's about a population, not necessarily a single individual. And we see these more primitive life forms over time in the rock strata evolve into something like a whale, starting with Pakicetus. We'll allow Kent to respond, and then we'll move to genetics after that. Kent, go ahead.
Sure. My apologies.
Okay. He kept using the word we see. No, you do not see. You imagine, because you place them in some kind of order that you believe happened. And we see whales only make baby whales. We see that. We see that they use those bones. That's not a question. I think scientists are well aware that the whale, but they make up these transitions like Berserkly here, go from a cow to a whale. This is imagination. You don't see that. And you don't see that fossil produced, so therefore, well, maybe the neighbors next door that died, they did it. The one we found couldn't do it, but the guy next door did, the one we didn't find. Don't you see how this is pure imagination? You guys are sharing your religion tonight, and you're welcome to keep your religion. I don't think it should be taught in our public school system. Go start a church and teach those who want to believe they came from an amoeba, but you don't see the population change or the individual change. There are populations of cows today. Is the population of cows changing to something else? Is it going to turn to a whale? I feel like I'm trying to explain colors to a blind man here. Don't you understand? There is no scientific evidence of an individual evolving or a population evolving. Putting them in some kind of sequence is imagination. That's not science. It's imagination. You're welcome to it. Arrange them however you want. I did that yesterday in my program. There are all kinds of animals that are white. There are white butterflies and white cows. That proves they're related. They're both white. Watch my series last night. I'm sure AJ will do a response to that one. By the way, AJ, I've only watched a couple of your responses, but they're not science, but they are funny to watch. And thank you for providing the humor.
So, Ken, what it sounds like you're trying to say is that our conditions for establishing if something is related or not is arbitrary. Our conditions are not arbitrary. Most of them are based on the morphology of the skeleton or other parts of the animal.
Well, you're back to the homology argument. The fact that there are similarities in the skeleton proves the same designer. Why would you say it proves your religion?
Why does it prove yours? Why does it prove a common designer?
Oh, I'm not asking for my religion to be taught at taxpayer expense. The burden of proof's on you.
You have in the past, but that's not the topic of this discussion.
Yeah, you have. That's
you just said that you were trying to get kids to.
Okay, you guys, we're gonna do one at a time, and then when you ask a question, you need to answer the question before you pose a question. So the question that Kent asked was, what was the question you asked again, Kent?
How can you know this change is taking place? No animals today can make this change. Why would you put these in some kind of order and say the whale, these bones in the whale, are part of evidence for it used to walking on land? Here it says right here in the textbook, the whale's pelvis is evidence of its evolution from four-legged land-dwelling mammals. That should not be in a biology book. That should be in a fairy tale book. We don't see any four-legged animals slowly changing to a whale today. All the animals make babies of the same kind. So what you have done, you've made a fictitious chart, your stupid family tree, and claimed that that is evidence because, after all, you drew lines on paper connecting them. And that's all it is. Evolution is nothing but imagination and lines on paper. And I admit you have taken over the school system. I admit. I think it was sad that you did that. I will admit Hitler took over Germany and Stalin took over Russia. I will admit to a lot of things like that. It's a historical fact. You guys won in the school system. It's not a historical fact that evolution has been proven or is true. It's sad that that's taught. And I'll do my best to stop it. Okay? By educating every kid so they don't believe it.
Donnie, can I try and share my screen again? I figured out how to do it. I just wanted to show an image, and maybe this will appease Kent a little bit more because these are actual micro photographs of embryos, dolphin embryos, and you can see on the early fetus that it has nostril grooves it has two nostril grooves on the front of the sort of head of the embryo. And as the embryo develops and gets older, these two holes migrate to the top of the head and close down into one hole, and it becomes the blowhole of the dolphin. Now, the evolutionary explanation for this would be something called evo-devo, like evolutionary development, where this action mirrors the movement of the nostrils from a four-legged land-dwelling tetrapod to the blowhole on the top of a cetacean. And I would just like to know what is your alternative explanation for why this happens?
So is your question that does embryonic development recapitulate like an evolutionary history?
I'm just asking Kent, why does this happen in his wording?
I think it's an amazing design. I think every step of that process is so amazing. I think you would discover at one end of the factory, they bring in steel beams. At the other end of that factory, they come out with a frame to a car. They got to drill a bunch of holes, weld a bunch of spots together, and make a car frame. It's a neat pattern. Maybe there's a reason why the dolphin nose hole appears to migrate up to the top during development. Maybe there's a reason they build the frame before they put the windshield on the car. I bet there's a reason. I don't know. That's an interesting one. But you think that is enough evidence to make you believe you are related to a banana?
No, I never claimed that.
Do you believe you're related to a banana?
No.
You don't? Do you believe these family trees showing all, does this show all the plants and all the humans going back to a common ancestor? Should kids be taught this? This is showing the banana and the humans are related. You don't believe this chart, AJ?
Like I said before, bananas aren't living organisms. A banana tree or banana plant, yeah, plants and animals going way back on an evolutionary family tree, they are joined, but it splits off. They're extremely distant. So it seems like you give that example on purpose because it just sounds ridiculous. Oh, a human and a plant are related. Well, sometimes things that are unintuitive are still true.
That's true. I agree with that. So if we give it more time, you think you are related to a banana over a long time ago. Yet you and a banana have a common ancestor over a long time ago. Is that what you believe?
No, I don't think sucking on a pacifier has anything to do with my evidence.
Okay, no, you didn't answer my question. Do you believe if we go back far enough in time, you had a common ancestor with a banana plant?
Yeah, I think animals and humans have common ancestors. Now, my question to you would be, do you think all humans have common ancestry?
I agree. I even know their names, Adam and Eve.
Okay.
But I'm not asking that to be taught at taxpayer expense. I think that's my religion. I think the scientific evidence points to all humans having a common ancestor. It does not point to humans and bananas having a common ancestor. And you want to believe that, that's fine. That's your imagination. It's not science.
I got something to say about that. You guys say wolves, dogs, and then you give the example of like bananas or strawberries. But what about wolves, dogs, and something like bears? Are wolves, dogs, and bears related to each other?
Well, okay, I don't think that animals care at all how we classify them. I know if you turn all the bears loose in the woods, they look for another bear to mate with. They don't look for a dog or a strawberry or pine tree. They know what their kind is. God said they would bring forth after their kind. And that's all. Now, the definition of kind might be a little slippery in some people's minds. So is the definition of species. But a dog and a wolf are different species, but can still interbreed. Anyway, so before we get into training a gnat and swallow a camel here, I think that the bears do not attempt at all to mate with the dogs, nor vice versa. I think they're a different kind. I don't think they have a common ancestor, but that'd be an interesting field of research for science. Science should be sticking with, wow, how far can we go with these relationships? You guys see dogs and wolves and coyotes and maybe dingoes and whatever else, they can interbreed. Whoa. Therefore, they're related to a pine tree. That's the logic you're using here. It's right on the chart. This is what kids are taught. All the many forms of life on Earth today, bananas and pine trees and AJ, are related to a common ancestor found in a population of primitive unicellular organisms. This is what is taught. This isn't science. These family trees are propaganda, nothing else. Here we have AJ and a banana plant related to a common ancestor. There it is right there. and amoeba. I wish you guys could understand, this is not science. This is pure religion. To draw lines on paper and say the protozoa slowly turned to a biology teacher over millions of years, I'll give you quadrillions of years. It's not going to happen. You can believe it did. You can hope it did. I think you're really running from the obvious. There's a creator. He made the world, and he's going to be the judge one day, and you don't want him to judge you. I think that my humble opinion, unbiased, is that that's what you really are running from. Go ahead.
Jackson, did you want to respond to
yeah,
that?
I just want to say, I will say that, yes, I do think I'm related to a banana, but not closely. I think that's the caveat there. Okay. And maybe by 700 and 800 million years apart, something like that. Okay. I just wanted to throw that in there. And I had another point, but I forgot it. So I'll let Dr. Dino, spelled differently, go.
Thank you. All right. So I wanted to come in here with a simple question for Kent or whoever wants to answer. Are birds dinosaurs? And if not, can you give me a concrete answer as to why?
I didn't hear the first 10 words. Are the what now?
Are birds dinosaurs? And can you give me a concrete reason are birds dinosaurs? And if not, can you give me a concrete reason as to why?
Are birds dinosaurs? Absolutely not. This is, again, our modern classification system. This is a bunch of humans trying to impose our decision on what should go in what group. The birds do not care at all what we think about where they should go. When they look to find a mate, they find another bird. When the reptiles look to find a mate, they find another reptile of their same kind. The alligators don't even look for the monitor lizards to mate with. The eagles don't even look for the crows to mate with. There's enough variation. I think God made them to bring forth after their kind. I think the whole idea that dinosaurs are related to birds, watch my lips, is stupid, real stupid. Okay, tell them all I said so. You can believe that if you want. I think I got my stupid meter up here. Levels of stupidity, that's getting near the top.
So maybe I should clarify. I'm not advocating for evolution in this question. Birds and dinosaurs could have been specially created. But I believe that there are certain anatomical characteristics of birds and dinosaurs that would put them in the same category. The same way as all monkeys are mammals, but not all mammals are monkeys. Does that make sense?
It does. I think we could classify all animals that breathe air and use oxygen. Wow, that would put a whole bunch of them together. I think we could classify, let's lump together all the ones that use gravity. Wow, that puts everybody in the same boat. Okay? So your classification system is meaningless to the birds. They don't care. And you said two key words I don't think you understand yourself. You said, I believe. That's fine. I don't care what you believe. That's not science. Have you chosen that name, Dr. Dino, to try to ride on my coattails with my fame? Is that why you chose that name, Dr. Dino? Because it got some similarities? Come on now.
Well, regardless of why I chose my name, that's irrelevant to the discussion. Also, yes, I use the phrase I believe. I'm using it in the colloquial sense, not the literal sense. I'm not believing it as a fragment of my personal religion. And also just animals that can breathe air and use gravity. I'm talking about their anatomy. There's a lot of anatomical characteristics that birds and many dinosaurs share. Therefore, I believe they would belong to the same parent category of dinosaur, or at the very least, archosaur. Can you give me a reasonable reason, why they should not be put in the same category?
Well, who's deciding what the reasons are to put them in any category? Where are we going to draw this line? Should we classify them by color? Should we classify them by size? Should we classify them by life expectancy? Should we classify them by number of babies they've reproduced? Watch my series last night. I just covered this very thing. It's man putting his classification. Why don't we classify all the cars based on their color? If they're red, they're related. Or no, if they have 3 wheels, they're related, and 4 wheels, and 10 wheels, and semi-trucks. So this is all, the birds do not care how we classify them. They do not try to mate with any reptiles at all. They're probably scared of most of the reptiles. I think the alligators like to eat the ducks, not mate with the ducks. Okay?
Regardless of if the birds care or not, it's humans that are making the categorization. Correct. So humans care. And
Okay.
and
Do the
also
ducks-
you didn't answer. Like, I'm going by the facets of their anatomy. Can you give me a physical reason why birds cannot be dinosaurs?
Birds have feathers and they can fly and they lay eggs that are calcium covered. Reptiles lay a leathery covered egg. Reptiles can't fly. They have 4 limbs. Birds have 2 that they can walk on and 2 that they fly with. Reptiles have walking on all 4. There are trillions of anatomical differences between reptiles and birds. Now, if you want to find a few similarities, again, this is you. I think what happened about 15 years ago or 20 years ago when they started teaching that, birds evolved from dinosaurs. I think somebody was sitting around somewhere saying, let's see how dumb people are. Can we get them to believe that? No, you'll never get them to believe that. Yeah, you watch. I get them to believe that. And it worked. And you fell for it. I think you're all silly for believing birds and dinosaurs are related.
Funny enough, Kent, all of those things that you stated were unique to birds are shared by many, many dinosaurs. Many dinosaurs had feathers. Many dinosaurs laid hard-shelled eggs. And many dinosaurs walked on 2 feet with 2 wings.
And could fly or glide.
True, yes.
Let me get that quote right. Many dinosaurs have feathers and walk on 2 legs and have wings. Is that what you said?
Yes, would you
About
like
30
a list?
species.
Yeah, they call
At
it
least 30
theropods.
species.
Okay. If we find a
Correct.
dinosaur, if somebody classified that creature as a dinosaur, maybe they got their classification mixed up. But I would like to see, there may be some examples of animals that have gone extinct, like a crossover species. There may be a bird that could not fly with his wings. We got those today with the ostrich and the emu and others. I don't think they're vestigial. They use them for balance when they're running. So I don't think you could prove it's vestigial, but all we know is ostriches make baby ostriches every time. Emus make baby emus. Reptiles make
That
baby
wasn't a
reptiles.
refutation. I agree. Emus make baby emus. Ostriches make baby ostriches. And I think what you were trying to get at first was that there are some dinosaurs that don't fit that category or don't fit the categorization of bird. And I agree. I'm not saying all dinosaurs are birds. I'm saying all birds are dinosaurs. Like
I know
all
you're
cars are
saying
automobiles, but not all automobiles are cars.
Correct. I know full well what you are saying. I think it's really silly that you chose to believe that. You're choosing to classify birds and dinosaurs together because somebody 20 years ago started to see, I wonder how dumb people are. Can we get them to believe this?
So
No,
you
it's
were
based
just-
on their
you were just saying-
anatomy,
sorry, AJ.
not just
You're
can we
just
believe-
saying
Okay.
it's silly. You're not offering a refutation. So you're not giving a reason why I should believe anything different.
Why
So
shouldn't
why
we
should I even
classify?
believe it's silly?
Well, why shouldn't we classify birds in with jet planes? They can fly.
Because jet planes aren't living organisms.
Oh, it makes it even more complicated when they're living organisms that can reproduce. It's more complicated. So
It doesn't matter if it's complicated or not.
Has anybody today in the history of humanity, recorded history, science is what we can observe, knowledge we gain by observation, testing, demonstration. Look it up. From the Latin word seer. We know from observation, birds make baby birds. We know that. We know from observing it happen. Reptiles make baby reptiles of their same kind. Crocodiles lay crocodile eggs and they cry crocodile tears and they make crocodile babies. So that is science. It is not science to put birds in with crocodiles and lizards. It is imagination.
They're both
You don't
artists.
know that.
Okay. And sorry, Jackson, can I say one last thing before you
Yeah,
go?
go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Let's say I agree with you that science is what we can observe, study, test, and demonstrate. I believe that's the full thing you say.
Right.
Okay, let's agree with that. In that case, you are the one who is denying reality and you are the one who is being unscientific. I am sticking to the facts of reality and you are just denying them without providing me an alternative. Okay, your turn, Jackson.
All right.
Well, wait. Before you slap and run, what am I denying? I agree birds produce baby birds and cows make baby cows. You're the one who's claiming birds and reptiles are related, and you're the one that's claiming you have a common ancestor with a banana millions of years ago. That's not observable science. Science is what we know, knowledge gained using observations, experimentation, and describe and explain the world around us. There's all kinds of definitions of science. Let's say science. What do we know? Knowledge gained by observation, experimentation, testable predictions. I predict if you crossbreed any bird with another bird of its kind, you're going to get babies of the same kind. I predict crows make baby crows, and I predict reptiles make baby reptiles. Right. Evolution is a religion. It's not a science. Go ahead.
Okay.
I got a couple,
sorry, the first two things you said were just wrong. I'm not arguing for evolution. I'm saying categorically the anatomy of birds puts them in the category of theropod dinosaurs. So
you
once again,
if you want.
You're just denying their anatomy that exists, and we can verify by looking at them. Now, it is Jackson's turn.
You're back to the homology. You're back to the homology argument. I agree. Reptiles have two four-limb bones, radius and ulna, and attached to a humerus. And they have carpals, metacarpals, phalanges. I agree. Birds do too. That doesn't prove a common ancestor. It proves a common designer. Or neither one should be taught in schools. Let's just stick with real biology. Kids, the reptiles have two bones in their wrist, radius and ulna. Yep, let's study how they work. I'm going to study how they grow when they reach the growth plate. And they have indeterminate growth. They keep growing. Birds don't do that. Birds stop growing at a certain size. Reptiles keep growing. What happened here? Something's different with the bones. We could talk about that if you'd like, but you are choosing the homology argument under a different flag here. It's the same thing. That doesn't prove common ancestry.
You're arguing with an argument I'm not making.
Oh.
You're just arguing. I don't know what you're arguing against.
Okay, no, I'll make it real simple.
You're thinking of a different debate.
You argued that birds and dinosaurs are related because of their anatomy, didn't you?
No, I didn't.
Okay,
I explicitly said I was not.
Why do you think birds and dinosaurs are related?
I never said they were related. I said they belong in the same parent category.
Do you believe that birds and dinosaurs are related, though, Doc?
As a separate issue, I do think birds are descended from dinosaurs, but that's not what I'm trying to argue.
Well, let me ask a question, because tonight's open mic is about evidence for evolution. So what arguments or lines of evidence would you look to say that dinosaurs and birds are related through common ancestry?
Can I give you that answer after Jackson gets to go? Because I'm feeling bad, man. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Okay, let's hand it to Jackson.
I just have a few kind of nitpicky and one little kind of funny thing to say. I believe Kent said that reptiles only lay leathery eggs while birds lay hard-shelled eggs. That's not true. Like, I used to have day geckos. They lay hard-shelled eggs. Most lizards do seem to lay hard-shelled eggs. Turtles lay hard-shelled eggs. A lot of turtles, not all. But and in a past debate, we were talking about animals being related to each other. We were debating if emus and ostriches were related, and I don't remember the context why I wrote that down, but we kind of disagreed that they were not. They're both ratites in that family, so they would have to be related. One more thing. He said dogs and bears don't try to mate with each other. Well, have you ever had a dog try to mate with you? Because I have. It's tried to hump my leg. You know what I'm saying? So
if they did, if they did that, I would teach them to fly.
I don't get it, but I respect their fly.
I think that's animal cruelty.
Oh, I get it now.
So the fact that a retarded dog tries to mate with your leg because his hormones are running wild is evidence he's related to you. I've seen dogs try to mate with a fire hydrant. Got to be related.
Well, no, I'm not saying that. That was just really kind of a funny comment I made. It's not really much of a point.
You said that they only try to mate with other dogs, which really isn't true, even if it's.
How about this? I'll make it simple for you. They only successfully mate with other dogs. How's that? They don't make a baby when they try to mate with a fire hydrant or your leg, do they?
Well, no, my legs don't Mules can't successfully reproduce.
What now?
A mule can't successfully reproduce. They're sterile. Some species of them are completely sterile.
1 out of 20,000 can mate, but that is rare for mules to be able to make babies. I agree. But what does that prove? I think if you put them side by side. Well, the mule and the horse and the donkey are very similar in many, many thousands of ways, and might have came from a common ancestor to the point where they can no longer interbreed. That would be separation, but it doesn't prove they're related to a pine tree, like you guys put on your chart.
Wouldn't they be a different kind if they can no longer interbreed?
I think they have diversified. I think Chihuahuas and Great Danes would have a hard time breeding, but I think that's not evidence we should make these stupid charts with a pine tree related to the dogs.
But genetically, if genetically, if they can't interbreed, even if they like, artificial insemination, they couldn't do it either.
Well, maybe
Doesn't that show they're a different kind.
Maybe we can define what a kind is really quick. So we would say that a kind is an organism that derived from an original created genetic pool. So you can have an organism that derives, two organisms that derive from the same original created genetic pool, and because of separation and mutation accumulation down the line, they can no longer be compatible. That doesn't mean that they're not the same kind originally. So maybe you can deal with that or use that definition of a kind.
And that doesn't mean you can extrapolate back that to include mules and horses and ladybugs. I agree, Sam, you're right. They might have diversified through whatever reason, genetic. I think it's a loss of chromosomes from one or the other. I forget the horse or the mule. But they're still like 60 or 62, close. But that doesn't prove they're related to a ladybug, no matter how much time you give them.
What about mules, horses, and oryxes, or zebras, or something like that?
Yeah, I don't know how far the genetic
example.
That would be that's what science is supposed to be doing. But you guys are taking the little bit of science and extrapolating it to mean horses and ladybugs are related.
Why is it always horses and ladybugs and not ladybugs and some other kind of bug?
Snake, we're taking turns at the moment. Okay. We'll do a round robin. We'll get to you guys shortly. But I believe Jackson was.
Here's the chart right here showing ladybugs and zebras going back to a common ancestor. Why should students be taught this at everybody's expense? This isn't science.
Well, when you say horses, zebras, then ladybugs, you're kind of leaving out like 1,000 different things in between that kind of anatomical tree that if you stretch it out, it sounds a lot less ridiculous. So I think you're kind of intentionally trying to make it sound ridiculous, by saying that.
Exactly right. I confess I'm trying to make it sound ridiculous because it is ridiculous. All these family trees are pure propaganda. This isn't science. This one used commonly in many textbooks, I've got 50 of them here beside me, shows humans and birds and pine trees, all go back to, and bears and whales, all go back to an amoeba. This, I wish you guys could see, there's probably a family tree of bears. There are now 8 varieties of bears based on man's classification system. Maybe they cannot interbreed anymore. Grizzly bear, I didn't check on that. Can the grizzly and the polar bear? I think they can. They get a pizzly, okay?
Yes.
But that doesn't mean they can mate with a pine tree or an eagle. But you want us to take this evidence of 8 kinds of bears coming from a common ancestor and say, see, bears and eagles are related. They're on the chart together. All I'm saying is you guys have gone absolutely stark raving stupid over this idea that these variations go forever. They are limited. God said they'd bring forth after their kind. That's what the scientific evidence shows. You wish to believe something else? Believe whatever you want. But you're outside of science when you say birds and dinosaurs are related. You're way outside of science. There's no evidence for that. There's no demonstrable scientific evidence. They can't bring forth.
All right. I have one other kind of unrelated point to that, if we're doing that, or someone else can go. Is that all right?
Yeah, you can make your last point, and then Beamsy, just real quick, don't lose your thought. So welcome, Beamsy, Snake, and Andrew. I'm not sure which one of you guys came in to the studio first. I'm not sure what order. Do you guys might not be a way to know?
Yeah, we can't see each other.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead, Jackson. We'll figure it out.
One more thing. You said fossils aren't forming today. I've heard you've said that pretty much, I think, basically every debate we've had. But I want to give an example of I've been like doing just some kind of nerd research on clams for the past few months. This is a sandbank pocketbook is what it's called. They're kind of a rare species. But my point is these things get buried in the mud all the time. And say the river changes course. That's what oxbow lakes are. The rivers change course. Whatever was there gets buried and stays there. And those lakes dry up, and whatever's there is still there. Some of them fossilize, some of them disintegrate over time, like this one right here. This one's starting to get some holes in it. Not all of them are preserved. This one was in a stream, not buried though. But I'm just saying fossils are very well forming today, I believe. So
okay, Jackson, one at a time. Are they fossilizing or mummifying? Or drying out? Are the ones you just held up simply dried out? Even if they could fossilize today, it's still a clam, and I bet it had baby clams, without exception. So I've said many times, nobody sees fossils forming today in any significant numbers. If there may be one or two examples like that, great, because the river changed. But there are trillions of fossils in the ground. There's a seam of petrified closed clams in Tennessee, 10 feet thick, that goes for several miles. Trillions of clams, and they're turned to stone. Are yours actually turned to stone? Are they mummified or dried out? Which is it? Send it down to me. I'd like to.
They're made of calcium carbonate as it is, so I guess you could kind of call them stone as they are, in a way. But
well, now come on, now you know better than this.
But no, some of them are. There are subfossil remains of clams that are starting to fossilize. I don't have any, but there are some. Yeah.
So they're starting to fossilize. Okay. You may be correct on that, but that doesn't prove evolution. They're still a clam. Sam, can you or Donnie take over for a few minutes? I've given a bunch of tours today. I've been drinking water all day. I need to go potty. I'll be back in a minute. Okay.
Yeah, no problem. So it looks like from the private chat, it looks like Snake came in first, and then Andrew, and then Beamsy. At least that's the order of the comments that I see. So until
sorry,
Snake
may I
gets
say
back,
something on the fossils forming today?
go ahead.
So I've had the privilege of working at many fossil excavation sites. I'm a paleontologist, or at least paleontology student. I have seen bones in all stages, from fresh to fully turned to stone. Like, there is an entire spectrum out there.
Yeah.
That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying about subfossil remains of clams, for example. Like, I don't have them, but in my collection, but there are some. Yeah.
And Doc, I know you wanted to answer the question that I had for you earlier. We can wait for Kent to get back and allow you guys to go back and forth on that. We can also allow, we'll go one at a time. Once Kent gets back, we can go Beamsy and Kent one-on-one for a little bit if you want. Snake, same thing. And Andrew, same thing as well. So to the audience, we do have room for 2 more. I see somebody backstage named Randall Alexander. And so I have recognized everybody who has joined so far. I just have to vet people before they come in. And so if you could just backstage, nobody has to see you on the show. Just go on webcam, just give a wave, and then you can turn your webcam off again, and then I'll know that it's safe to bring you in. Okay, so anyways, until Kent comes back, is there any points that anybody wanted to bring up? Or Sam, was there anything you wanted to address, brother?
No, I'm good.
Well, I think I have one more thing I wrote down here. It's and it's something I've probably asked before in another debate, but what exactly, even say you believe in evolution, accept evolution, however you want to phrase it. What would a transitional fossil look like to you? And describe that in detail if you could. Either Sam or Donnie, whoever wants to take that.
Okay,
Well, I'm going to answer that differently than Donnie, but go ahead if you want, Donnie.
I typically argue when it comes to, as you know, Jackson, homologous patterns, nested hierarchical patterns, and even transitional forms, which I would probably refer to as mosaics. Those kinds of creatures that would blend the features of 2 different creatures, maybe some of those traits you'd consider basal as one group to another group, and the other set might be more derived, you'd say, within the same creature. But I would look to that which human engineers and designers build, and they've built some very interesting mosaics. Crossover SUVs, for example, whether it's the Dodge Journey, whether it's the Ford Flex, the Jeep Gladiator, these kinds of vehicles resist classification. Are they an SUV? No. Are they a van? No. There's something in between. Just like the military, they've designed a type of vehicle that is built for the transitional environments between sea and land. So a military amphibious assault vehicle, for example, is perfect for that transitional environment, but it is horrible for the sea environment. It's also horrible for the land environment, right? A tank would be better for the land. A ship would be better for the sea or the ocean. And so one could argue that that specific military vehicle does blend the features of a land vehicle and a vehicle built for the sea, but I would argue it's for design. Does that kind of answer your question, Jackson?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I just wanted to hear what your opinion on what it would look like, yeah.
Would you accept that definition of the blending of features, basal?
I mean, something like that, yeah.
Okay. Well, it looks like we got Kent back. Brother, good to have you back. Feel free. Go ahead.
Thank you. Jackson, would you please send me a couple of those clams? I'll pay up to $10 for shipping if you can send me a couple of what you have.
Hey, I've got like 600 of them. That's a lot of money.
Pick out the best two that you think are evidence of fossilization.
Oh, I don't have any of that, but I got some good specimens. I could really send you some.
You can't really send some?
Oh, I could really send you some, I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, just put if it's more than $10, let me know ahead of time. But up to $10 for postage. Send me a couple what you think are the best examples of a clam fossilizing.
All right, I'll try to find one that's in that state. I've got literally
not mummifying, not drying out. And clams have hard shells to begin with, but this is actually called a replacement fossil. The minerals in the ground replaced even the shell. There's not even the shell left on this when it's turned into stone. There's several different types of fossilization. So I'd love to see what you got. Thank you.
Well, I could just send you some that are interesting just for your museum. Just some really good specimens, you know.
Send me whatever you think is evidence for fossilization today.
All right. I think.
Sorry.
I think, Kent, have you engaged with Beamsy before?
I don't recall that name. Beamsy, have we talked before?
No, we've never actually met before.
Okay. Well, hello. I'm Kent Hovind. Go ahead.
Pleasure to meet you. My name is Beamsy online, and my real name is Dr. Yevon Kemis. I'm actually a stratigraphist by trade. One question that I'd like to put forward to you is, you make the claim that every fossil has had all their entire bodies completely mineralized, but how would you explain things like chalk? Because they are made up exclusively of the body parts of
trillions of microscopic creatures, right? Chalk,
yes.
Gypsum, chalk. There's quite a few examples of huge seams, diatomaceous earth. Trillions and trillions of tiny microscopic organisms all died at the same time. Wow, almost sounds like Noah's flood, doesn't it?
No, they couldn't have died at the same time because they are actually from a bacteria. And because of their hard shell, it's the hard shells that have actually gathered up. And they haven't actually changed their mineral composition. They've just lithified in place.
Are there huge seams of them all together, like a whole bunch of them died at the same way? Does chalk come in giant layers that go for miles?
Yes.
Can you show me where that's forming today? Like
yes, there are. Yes, there are actually white clay that you can find in areas around Alaska and the northern parts of Russia. Those they are actually going to be turned into chalk after they actually go through the lithification process.
I'm only understanding about a third of your words here, like muffled in or something. But so you're saying
sorry.
Chalk seams are forming today in Alaska and Russia?
At the state at the moment, it's just referred to as white clay, but it has the same chemical composition and it's made up of the same remains that chalk is actually formed from.
Well, are you British? Chalk instead of chalk?
No, I'm Australian.
Australian. Okay. I loved your country over there. Australia. Okay. So what? What does this have to do with anything as we're talking about tonight? If layers are forming today, that would indicate, and if we see how they're forming today, rapid death of trillions of these creatures from some kind of climate change or something, that would fit in perfectly with the biblical view that rapid disaster formed all the layers of chalk and diatomaceous earth and other things that fit. Thank you. You've supported my Bible theory. Thank you. I'll check on that.
No, the sedimentation of the coccoliths that come from the coccolithopores can only occur in stagnant water of at least 22 degrees Celsius, but below 30 degrees Celsius. That does not happen in rapid succession because they actually need to be lithified, and that cannot occur in any form of flood.
Okay, well, I think during the flood of Noah, there would be lots of places on the earth where it would be stagnant water. Water just sitting there. The purpose was to kill the people that had, they'd gone so wicked. So we're not here to defend the flood tonight, though. You're supposed to be giving the best evidence for evolution. We're going off topic, I think, deliberately. But
no,
I think
we did go down a rabbit hole. But the question was, how would you explain the aspects of the coccoliths? They still have the same chemical compositions that they were when they were alive. They haven't actually gone through the process that you were presenting.
Okay, well, I'll be glad to stand corrected, but I think I've tried to be careful to say we don't see fossils forming today in any significant numbers. I'm not aware of even a single fossil being formed today. When you bury an animal today and it dies, can you dig it up later and it's fossilized? Maybe under very special conditions. There have been people, there was a man buried and died in 1880, I think. I've got the stats somewhere. The family, when they went to bury his wife next door, the water soaked into the grave. They said, oh, Grandpa's been in the ground 14 years. And there's water in there. Let's move him up. So they dug him up, made a new grave back in the 1800s, and it had turned to stone in 14 years. So I suppose it's possible. But again, it's still a human being, and I bet he had baby human beings when he had babies. So finding a fossil of anything doesn't prove it had changed, helping change to something else. See if you can find that, would you? The fossilized man from the 1800s. I think it was 14 years he was in the ground in mineral-rich water, which is how fossils form. So, but again, this is way off topic. That's not evidence for evolution.
No, I'm trying to present the aspect that it's deep time, but Dr. Dino said he had to actually go, and he had another question for you.
Well, I'm not sure how much time, Kent, you're going to give us tonight, so we want to make sure that everyone in the room gets plenty of time.
Sure.
Well, if I could jump in, Doc, as in Doc, D-O-K, he said he had a question or an answer earlier. We were asking what evidence you'd provide that argues for a relationship between dinosaurs and birds. And it sounds like you wanted to answer that. And so Feel free to do so. And then you and Kent can go back and forth for a little bit. And then Jackson, I know you had a point, so we'll put you next on the list, and then we'll jump to Snake as well. So go ahead.
All right. So there's a few points on geology and a few points on the subject of biology. I might ask Beamsy to fill in a few of the holes of the geo side since I have to go soon. But basically, we have records of dinosaurs from about 200 million years ago, 200, 220, something like that. No birds until about the mid-Jurassic, I think about 160, 170 million years ago. So we know that birds came after dinosaurs. We also see this transition within small theropod dinosaurs into a more bird-like form. And it happened 2 or 3 times, not just the one time. You've all heard of Archaeopteryx, I'm sure. Archaeopteryx was one of the earlier birds, but there were many later ones. And actually several lineages that just didn't make it past the Cretaceous mass extinction. If I could share my screen, Donnie, we can also see it through some facets of their anatomy. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to ask Beamsy to elaborate on the dating methods if the discussion goes.
Okay, let's do this. I appreciate it, Doc. I'm going to call you Doc, and then Kent. So, Doc, thanks for the points. We'll stop there before we move on to any more. We'll allow Kent to respond, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, what he's done, he's made an incorrect statement to start with, and then is building on that. I would like to respond. If I said pink elephants can fly, therefore, if we lived under, no, stop. Pink elephants can't fly, okay? And there's no such thing as a geologic column. You're assuming these layers of the earth are different ages. I've been asking for a long time, if the layers are different ages, where's all this new material coming from? If indeed the Holocene is only 10,000 years old, like this chart shows in the textbook, where was all that material sitting around for 2.5 billion years? Are these layers coming from outer space? Your whole premise of your argument is the idea that these layers are different ages, and they're not. All over the world, we find petrified trees standing up, connecting them. This idea that the top layer is younger is stupid. If I shuffle a deck of cards, is the top card younger? No. The layers are shuffled. Every speck of dirt on the planet is the same age, whether it be 6,000 or 6 trillion. It's the same age. And you guys, your whole, all of your argument from here on is based on a false premise. The fact that you find certain dinosaurs in certain layers might be based on body density, habitat, who knows what, but not based on age. Those layers are not different ages. Your geologic column is the problem, not the solution. So you're going to say we see changes in time. That, again, you're assuming the layers mean something. Shake up a jar of dirt. It'll separate into layers in your hand while you do it. So if the top layer is younger, where did it come from? Outer space? Was the Holocene hiding someplace in space before it landed on top of all this? Was the Jurassic Age hiding in space before the Cretaceous came along? You guys, I wish you could understand it. Your Bible, the atheist and evolutionist Bible, is right here on the screen, the geologic column. It does not exist anywhere. And so I would say I disagree with your premise that records of dinosaurs for 200 million years before birds came along. No, stop. This is not a record of dinosaurs for 200 million years. You're all based on this stupid geologic column. All the layers are the same age. You guys I wish you could see it. You're all over the world, there are petrified trees standing up, connecting all the layers.
Kent, may I speak?
Well, he wants to build his argument about dinosaurs turning to birds based on a faulty premise. There is no geologic column.
That was part one. I have a part two, but Beamsy would be better equipped to argue through the part one with you since he is a stratigraphist. Can I get to part two before I have to go? Because I do have to go in a couple minutes. Right. Thank you, Donnie.
Yes, no problem. And what we'll do, because I think the geologic column and the questions and challenges associated with that is important. So we'll allow you, Doc, I got your screen shared. Feel free to cover your next point. And then once you and Kent are done engaging, we'll allow those familiar with the geologic column like Jackson Rowe. I know you and Kent have had a debate specifically on that. We'll allow some engagement on that. And so, Doc, go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much. So first of all, as I was saying earlier, not arguing from evolution, but from anatomy, we can see two different dinosaur forelimbs here. Now, the one over on the left, this is Deinonychus. This is what the dinosaur in my profile picture is. And the other one is Archaeopteryx. Now, even though the actual animals are physically fairly distinct, as you can see right here, top one again being Deinonychus, bottom one being Archaeopteryx, they have a lot of the same features. And a lot of birds share the same features. Right. Next, there's a lot of other features that birds and dinosaurs share. As an example, first, I don't know what this leads to, but it was on this page when I found this picture. Birds and dinosaurs share the exact same respiratory system. At least some dinosaurs had it. This is a unidirectional system. Basically, they just breathe in and then just keep breathing in. And the air just passes right through them. It's actually a lot more efficient than the mammalian one. And lastly, even though small birdie dinosaurs have feathers, it's not just them. This is Eutyrannus. This is a 30-foot long, 2 to 3 ton carnivorous dinosaur. And we know for a fact it was covered in feathers. So there's a lot of things, even not very birdy dinosaurs, share with birds. A lot of things.
Okay, thank you very much, Doc. Appreciate the visuals. We'll hand it back to Kent for a response. Go ahead, Kent.
Well, I don't believe that 30-foot dinosaur with feathers for 1 second. They might be finding protein or scales that are fraying out, making filaments and stuff like that. I think you need to do some more study on that. But if we found a dinosaur with feathers, I don't think they have. I deny that they have. But if they do, That proves that dinosaurs are turning to birds. Maybe you just found an unusual dinosaur. Like you said, a transitional thing. Like Donnie gave a good example. The military makes special vehicles to do different things. And they're not transitional. They're designed for that feature. Maybe there's a dinosaur designed for cold weather. This would not be evidence of any change from one to another. We don't see any animals today change to anything else. Every farmer in the world will tell you when he breeds his cows, he expects to get a cow. And he does. Go to any dog kennel, they expect to get puppies when they crossbreed their dogs. They can't crossbreed with the fire hydrant. It won't work. They have mating motions and stuff they go through because of hormones, but it has nothing to do with mating. So I think that if they did find a feathered dinosaur, which I do not believe they have, if they did, that still would not be proof that dinosaurs turned to birds. Think about it. In an honest court of law, they'd laugh you out of the court.
All right. Well, unfortunately, this has been put through honest courts of law, and every time it's gone in favor of evolution. But also, this is the fossil of Tyrannus. If you look closely at it, you can see the outlines of feathers. Now, I know that there are some creationists who say that, no, these are actually collagen fibers, but we can tell the difference. Collagen is structurally very different from stuff like feathers. So we know that this 30-foot animal was covered in simple feathers. Not the extravagant plumage you'll see in modern birds, but very simple feathers.
I do want to make a point for the record.
Wait. Before we move on anywhere,
Yeah.
Donnie, you're claiming it was covered in simple feathers, okay?
Yes.
Flight feathers are designed for flight. They're like a Venetian blind. The shaft is off center so that on the upstroke, they all open to let the air go through. On the downstroke, they all close to trap the air like a Venetian blind. It's an amazing design. We have emus here. They do not have flight feathers anywhere on their body. They have a feather. The shaft is right down the middle with the fuzz on both sides. So I'm not prepared to discuss that one you just mentioned. But again, it's a fossil from the dirt. You don't know it had any children. You don't know that it had different children. You are imagining that. And how can you not see that no fossils are going to count in an honest court of law? Show me an animal today that is changing to something else. We can watch bacteria for thousands of generations in a few years. They still make baby bacteria every time. There are no changes. Well, there are no significant changes accumulating, or it just doesn't happen. That's why I continually say evolution is based on imagination. That's why I love to use SpongeBob to try to get you guys to stop and think you have been duped. I feel sorry for you.
All right. Well, first, yes, it had simple feathers, not flight feathers. They would have been similar to down. Flight feathers evolved in other lineages of dinosaurs. Second, I've already given the explanation for why this fossil didn't have to give any children. Like, there is not one human that gave birth to you. There was technically, but you came from a population of humans. All of us came from a previously existing population. That's true of every animal, both alive now and in the fossil record. And there's a lot to unpack there. If you'd like to have an actual formal debate, I'd love to do that.
Anytime. Bring it on.
Sure. Donnie has my schedule.
We can definitely set that up. Doc, I appreciate it. Kent, was there anything else you wanted to respond to? Yeah.
I'm curious, maybe just off topic a little bit, why you don't show your face and why you chose a name similar to mine. Are you trying to ride on my coattails?
Well, I don't show my face because I don't want to show my face. Not everyone does. And second, yes, it is a parody of your name. This is off topic, but I am very much not a fan of your work, and I would like to do everything I can to dismantle your work if I possibly can, because I think that is the righteous thing to do in the name of my Lord, God in heaven. Thank you for having me, Donnie. See you all later.
Well, wait. I didn't understand what he said. He thinks he should try to destroy my work. Is that what he was saying, Donnie?
He said he wants to dismantle your arguments.
Oh, dismantle. Okay. Beamsy, there's a face. Okay.
Seems like a frozen face.
No, that's okay.
My camera got eaten by the cat, so this is the best I can do. Sorry.
I show my face. I give my address. I give my phone number. I got nothing to hide. Go ahead.
We can do some live in-person debates, Kat, with you. I wanted to point out to Doc real quick. Alan Fiducia, who is not a young Earth creationist by any means,
right?
Very strongly anti-young Earth creation. He put out a relatively new book. I have it here, Romancing the Birds and Dinosaurs. So this is quite updatable, 2017. And he responds to those arguments, and he points out what you pointed out, Kent, that a lot of these so-called proto-feathers are actually decayed skin fibers. And they did a study, I think it was back in 2005. They've also done follow-ups where they found an excellent match between partially decayed skin from a variety of animal carcasses like sharks, dolphins, ichthyosaurs that look identical to the so-called proto-feathers in Eutyrannus and Sinosauropteryx and these other claimed feathered dinosaurs. And we would all agree that dolphins and sharks don't have feathers. And so, yes, these decayed collagen fibers can fray out depending on the environment. There can be variation in them as well, where they look like, proto feathers, but they're not actually.
Wasn't it certain skin pigments that caused that also? There was a few things, I believe, that caused that illusion of feathers.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Is it my turn yet? On that,
you know what, Snake? You've been waiting patiently, Jackson.
Yeah,
your hand was just raised,
well,
so feel free to. Okay, so we'll go Jackson and then you, Snake. You're gonna get lots of time. Don't worry, Snake.
Okay, I'll just
Jackson. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I just want to say Eutyrannus. There were 3 specimens discovered of Eutyrannus, all 3 of which had feathers, and the feather impressions were 8 inches long, which is far longer than any possible collagen fibers could have been. And if that's not good enough, there are impressions of pennaceous feathers on a small dinosaur called Kaihong, which I think if you looked at the skeleton, everyone would agree that looks like a dinosaur. But it also has pennaceous feathers, especially along the tail in the fossil. So that's all I really wanted to say. So just go ahead,
Okay.
Snake.
Kent, go ahead.
No, I get to respond.
Go ahead, Kent, sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead.
If they found a fossil of a dinosaur that appears to have feathers, or even if it has feathers, that's not proof for evolution. It's a fossil. No animal today is doing this. No animal today is changing to something else. You are imagining that fossil had power to do something that no animal today can do. Maybe there was a line of dinosaurs with feathers and they all went extinct. Could be. I doubt it, but it's okay. Let's for the sake of the argument, let's say that's true. You don't know it's changing.
In my yard, they're not extinct. They're just flying around out there.
You have flying snakes in your yard?
No. It's the flying dinosaurs. They're all over the place. They're everywhere.
Oh, birds are dinosaurs, huh?
Yeah.
And I bet you're related to a banana too, aren't you?
By hundreds of millions of years separated, yeah.
Billions of years separated.
That's right.
Okay.
Hundreds of millions, yeah.
I feel sad that our tax dollars had to pay for that to somebody to teach you that stuff, and you fell for it. I feel sad.
I pretty much taught myself all this stuff.
Oh, you taught that yourself? Wow. Okay. You taught yourself. Right. You related to a banana over millions of years ago.
Through a lot of research, yes.
Okay.
Snake, can go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, let's actually, before we hand it to Snake, I'd be curious, Jackson, did you have any response to Kent's argument or challenge earlier on the geologic column? Couple questions.
Geologic column. Well, there are some places in the world where you can see most of it, if not, all of it, all the major layers. Like I've said this 100 times: Williston Basin, the Ganymede Basin, the Bonaparte Basin, where like most, if not all, of the geologic column, well, from Precambrian to present, is there. Not all of the Precambrian, but But anyway, Snake.
Well, let me respond now. Yeah, Jackson, what is the difference between Cretaceous limestone and Permian limestone? They're both limestone. How do you know one's Permian and one's Cretaceous?
I would think where it would be found and the date on the when it was radiometrically dated, the igneous layers between it would be a good indicator. And
I assume you're aware from watching my seminar, they date the layers by the fossils they contain, and they date the fossils by the layers they come from. Circular reasoning, all the way simple. What is the difference? So the difference between Cretaceous limestone and Permian limestone. Almost every one of these imaginary layers contain limestone somewhere within that time frame, or sandstone or shale.
I guess
What's
for
the
composition of the Permian limestone and the Cretaceous limestone, I'm not sure. That's probably a question for Beamsy. But
Yeah,
I think
take it away, Beamsy.
I think Snake's itching to go though.
Okay, go ahead.
If Bimsy wants to answer that real quick, I'd be more than happy to hear his answer because he's the stratigraphist.
It's not a short answer, so just go, Snake.
So there is a difference, though?
There is a massive difference, but it takes a lot of explaining, so just take your turn.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm showing on my screen the images from a paper that was a review of Fiducia's claims about the collagen fibers, and a lot of them were actually identified as scratches on the fossils, and this is collagen fibers from an ichthyosaur. They look absolutely nothing like...
What's the name of the paper, Snake, if you don't mind?
Let me see real quick. On the purported presence of fossilized collagen fibers in an ichthyosaur and a theropod dinosaur.
Who's the authors?
It's up on the screen. Smithwick, Mayer, Saita, Benton, Vinther.
Okay, because he does respond. It looked like that paper was from 2013.
That's 2017.
2017. Okay, because I would recommend checking out his newest book that came out after the fact, because he has responded to his critics. And who's right? Well, it might be a matter of, looking at Fiducia's arguments, looking at those that have responded to him.
Okay, so let me get this argument out. And I'm sitting on a few arguments, but I'll try and keep my focus.
Sure.
Is it still showing? Yeah.
Yes.
So on the left here is the collagen fibers from the ichthyosaur. And on the right is just a sampling of fossil feathers. This one's from Sinosauropteryx. Now, they're nothing alike. These are single fiber, just straight lines. There's no branching, and they're crisscrossing each other. Whereas the feathers have branching and fraying, of course, similar to feathers. And they have a central rachis, which you can see. If you can see my cursor, I'm circling one of them. That's very clear. The collagen fibers do not have any of these features, so they're very different. And here's just more examples of fossil feathers. They actually fossilize pretty well in many cases. So you can tell this is not collagen fibers, just based on the fact that it's obviously a feather, but also comparing it to actual collagen fibers that don't branch or anything like that. So yes, dinosaurs did have feathers, and we'll get into the argument about how we can tell that birds are in fact a type of dinosaur that branched off from feathered dinosaurs. But we'll just let you sit with that part and let you respond.
Yep. Okay. So Snake, thank you very much. We're going to hand it back to Kent. Kent, I think you're muted on your end. Okay. You're good now, Kent. The floor is yours.
Okay. Again, they are not giving any evidence for evolution. They're showing a fossil feather. I don't believe it, but I'll go again. I'll say, let's say they find a dinosaur with feathers. Does that prove it's transitioning, and therefore all dinosaurs, it transitioned to, and all the birds are part of that same family descended from dinosaurs? No. This is so silly. How can you not see? If you found a feathered dinosaur, so what? That doesn't prove anything's changing. There are no animals today that are slowly changing their scales for feathers. How many animals today have scales? A whole bunch of them. How many are turning to feathers? None. Evolution, science, is what we can observe. It's knowledge gained by observation, testing, demonstration. Show me in a laboratory a scaled creature and make it turn into feathers. Show me how it happens. And even then, if you could do that, I would argue you're controlling an environment to make it happen. That doesn't mean it happens in nature. I guess really to be science, it'd have to be show me how it happened in nature. You guys, you're not seeing that you're destroying your own argument. There is no evidence for evolution, none. You want to make these family trees and make all the kids get taught this. Go ahead.
Okay, so you don't believe the facts in front of your face. I'm showing you the difference between them, and you kind of just skipped right through that. So let's go through the argument for the fact that they are dinosaurs. This is a creationist method for determining what a kind is, and it's called the multidimensional scaling of barometric distance. And so basically, this is a published paper, and basically, this is only one, or I'm only showing one dimension of it. It's actually three-dimensional, but this one's a good angle. I've shown this many times, and basically what happens is, since the arc is so small and tiny, and the amount of life is just staggeringly varied, and 99% of all species ever found are dead. I don't know about ever found, but maybe that's an estimate. But anyway, most of the animals are dead. Don't know why God would bother making them if he's going to kill most of them. But the point being, you have to fit most animals into a kind to get them onto the ark. And so you have to have animals with macroevolutionary differences having to be related on the ark. So they came up with baromenology. This is one of the methods, but it was abandoned because it proved that birds are dinosaurs, because it showed that the amount of difference between birds and dinosaurs was smaller than the total amount of difference between birds and between the theropod dinosaurs. So birds have all of the distinct.
Okay, actually, Taylor, let's stop there.
Characteristics.
Taylor, let's stop there. I think there's enough points on the table there. Well,
Right.
we're going to stop there, Taylor. We're going to hand it to Kent now. Go ahead, Kent.
Yeah, he's going to try to sneak in a slap at Noah's Ark and then go on to something else. I'd like to respond.
I didn't sneak it in. It was there.
Snake, look at me. Listen to me. If you don't believe all the animals could fit on Noah's Ark, and you do believe all the animals fit in a dot smaller than a proton, you need to go see a shrink. You believe the Big Bang Theory, that everything in the universe, all the stars, not just the animals on the ark, all the stars, everything fit in a dot smaller than a proton? That's what the Big Bang Theory teaches. You're complaining about them not fitting on the ark. For heaven's sake, you think they fit in a dot. What is wrong with you guys?
You're dodging the point. So
I'm dodging the point.
Yep, the point is that these animals with macroevolutionary differences between each other have to be able to be related, or else they can't fit on the ark.
Okay, well, let me go back to my point then. I don't know how many kinds of animals were on the ark. I don't care. Okay, but
I know.
I'm not asking for that to be taught in public schools at taxpayer expense. You want the idea that all the animals fit in a dot taught at taxpayer expense in the public schools. You want the Big Bang Theory taught in schools, don't you? You think that's part of science?
Super dense matter can be smaller than the matter we see right now. That's observable.
Okay,
so I'll translate a black hole.
Let me translate that.
Actually, that's wrong. You have publicly advocated that the government implement.
Let's keep it on topic. We're having a good show.
He brought it up. He brought up government enforcing religions.
Okay, evidence for evolution. Let's stick to the topic. Go ahead, gentlemen. Continue.
I'm just responding to that.
He said super dense matter. Okay,
Snake, if you're going to keep over talking, we're just going to move on to someone else.
I wasn't over talking. I was being over talking.
Now, you've been asked to calm down multiple times.
When he mentioned about super dense matter, okay, let me translate that for everybody. He does believe everything fit in a dot. He does believe that. He's trying to hide it. Well, we do believe in super dense matter. Real simple, Snake. Do you believe all the stars, all the planets, all the animals, all the Pacific Oceans, everything came from a dot smaller than a proton, like the textbooks teach? Simple yes or no. Do you believe that?
Yes, all matter can be compressed, and we see that in black holes. And Sam, no, I was being interrupted by Donnie, which is fine if you're the moderator. I'm not trying to call you out, but I was being overtalked. So anyway, yes, matter, super dense matter exists and is very small. It's called a black hole. Can we move on, or are you going to dodge some more?
Can I address that?
Go ahead. Okay? I didn't dodge it at all.
Okay. Is that okay with you, Kent?
Oh yeah, please do.
Yeah, so the Bible says that only 2 of each kind had to go on the ark. So if God would have created these dinosaurs from the beginning with a lot of genetic ability to diversify, and they could have diversified quite a bit, But all of those subcategories of the kind didn't have to go on the ark. So it's possible that there were many dinosaurs that didn't survive the flood, and it wouldn't matter. And then when those two of that original kind got back on the ark, they might not have diversified in the same way. So I think you're making your argument has a false premise that there should be a representative on the ark of everything that we find in the fossil record, and that's just false. The Bible is really clear, 2 of each kind. So if that original kind paved the way to have all of these different subcategories pre-flood, then we wouldn't have those represented after the flood. That's pretty simple.
Yeah, that's partially a straw man and partially making my point for
that's
me.
actually not a straw man. That's a representation.
Can I talk, or are you going to overtalk me?
Yeah. So I'm gonna hand it back over to Kent if you wanted to continue with him. But
No,
that's
please,
a direct
let
answer.
him-
Interesting.
Please let him keep talking.
I can't
This is
respond?
hilarious. Go ahead, keep talking. This is hilarious.
Sure.
Thank you, Kent.
Okay.
So yeah, that's a straw man, and I'll tell you why. I never said that there has to be a representative for every category. You misunderstood the entire point. The other part of that was in your correction, quote unquote, of me, you were making my point for me. Yes, those representative original kinds that were on the ark diversified so much to the point that every specimen that we found today, which means that there's a large amount of macroevolutionary difference coming from a singular kind. So you're making my point for me, because there's so many species today and in the past that in order to be able to fit on the ark from original kinds, they have to have the amount of kinds on the ark is limited. So things like the horse kind has a huge amount of macroevolutionary distance between it.
Yeah, that's not a problem. We understand that things change. I don't understand why my answer didn't thoroughly address everything that you just reiterated. I've already addressed that. You understand?
There is a lot of built-in ability for morphological adaptation and change. But Snake, I don't see any true anatomical novelty going on in these dinosaur variations. We do see a lot of phenotypic diversity in terms of morphology, but not anatomy, nothing significant there.
I'll explain why it's a problem. Because the amount of change that you accept occurs within a kind is far larger than the amount of change distance between separate kinds.
Well, a lot of that's just going to be your evolutionary assumptions.
No, this can be quantified.
Yeah. So there are kinds such as the dog kind, where we would say something similar to a wolf would give way to all of this abundance, this plethora of different types of dogs. That's a lot of change. That's no problem. That wolf, or whatever that apex animal would have been before flood, would have been able to give way to even more change.
Huh?
Still not a problem. All we needed
so-
was 2 of each kind on the ark, or 7, whatever that number was, and that's all that we need. And so when you say that all of these things wouldn't fit on the ark, that's again one of your evolutionary assumptions that you're forcing on our position, and we just simply reject it. You're just wrong.
That's not what I said. I said that in order to fit them on the ark, they have to change a lot. And the amount of change that occurs within the dog kind is larger than the amount of change that occurs between dinosaurs, Archaeopteryx, and birds, the earliest birds. That's the point that you're missing and completely is going over your head, or what's happening.
Things change. Woo-hoo.
Right. So the amount of
Things
change is the question.
Okay, let's Kent, I saw your hand raised, brother. We'll hand it back to you. Go ahead.
Okay, Snake, we all agree there are changes. Are the changes limited by anything?
Yes, they're limited by physics and by the traits of the parent generation.
Okay, would you agree they have been crossbreeding dogs trying to get smaller dogs to the teacup Chihuahua? I don't know if that's the smallest. We'll say that it is, okay? Is there a limit? Will they ever get a dog as small as a flea?
No. Is any of that kind of change relevant to what I'm showing on my screen?
Yes, I'm trying to point out that there are changes within the same kind. 514. Let me get up here. Okay.
Am I proposing changing a dinosaur into a flea? Into a flea-sized dinosaur?
A chicken.
A chicken is flea-sized?
Yeah, you think that a bacteria went from an elephant and a flea?
Right.
No.
Just to see the changes that we observe, there are now 50 varieties of watermelons. Most have been artificially selected as opposed to naturally selected, but they probably had a common ancestor called a watermelon. Is this evidence that watermelon are related to birds?
It's evidence that life can change a lot.
I agree.
So the question is, how much can life change? The amount of change that you accept is bigger than the amount of change that I'm proposing on screen right now. All that there is a difference between a Microraptor and an Archaeopteryx is a change in like proportion of features that are already present. And so you accept that, actually.
Well, we back to the homology argument. I accept that there are
This
similarities.
is the homology argument.
I accept that there are similarities in many different types of animals. I believe that evidence of a common designer. Why do you reject that premise or conclusion?
You have no way of testing that.
You have no way of testing they got a common ancestor either.
Yes, we did.
You found bones in the dirt. You have no way of testing. You have no way of testing to see if they had a common
bones in the dirt. I have another point to make.
Sorry, do you want to know how we found these bones in the dirt?
Shovel.
It was specifically and only possible because of the theory of evolution. The scientists predicted. What's the best way to test a scientific theory? Is if you make predictions about the natural world, and then those predictions are fruitful. So they predicted that there should be an in-between between birds and theropods because the homology is so strong. So using the theory of evolution, they predicted that there should be a transitional form. The transitional form was found in conjunction with the predictions made by geology, and thus that confirms and tests the theory. That's the best way to test. You can do none of that with the theory that life was created by an intelligent being.
All right, I have something that kind of goes back a little bit.
Just 1 second, Jackson. We're gonna let Kent. We're gonna let Kent address that, and then
we'll throw it to Jackson Rowe. I do, before Kent leaves, I still do want to get an answer to Kent's challenges on the geologic column. So we have gone back and forth on this for quite a while. It's been great. Kent, feel free to respond. Then we'll throw it to you, Jackson. And then Snake and Jackson or any other evolutionists on the panel, I'd like to see some answers to the geologic column challenges. Okay, Kent, we'll start with you. Go ahead, brother.
What he is showing is there are variations within the same kind, and there are some pretty bizarre variations, like the Great Dane and the Chihuahua, okay? But they're still obviously dog, and I think the Bible says they can bring forth. So one of the key factors in deciding if they're the same kind is, can they make a baby? Which is why I'm doing my Hope Making Babies series, and nobody's answering any of my questions. I ask every Friday night. I have more tomorrow night. How did this happen? Are we covering the Komodo dragon tomorrow night? You guys are, not strangely, you guys are deliberately avoiding simple questions. Can you give a scientific answer for how this evolved? Not just a generic fairy tale statement. We see varieties of chickens. I agree. They might have had a common ancestor. And there are some bizarre varieties of chickens. There are some bizarre varieties of pumpkins. 111 kinds of pine trees. 12,000 different kinds of grass. 150 species of roses. 60 species of rat, 1,000 species of sharks, 60 species of eagles. Does the fact that there are 60 species of eagles prove in your mind that they're related to sharks? Why on earth would we draw lines on a paper between shark and eagle in the family tree? This isn't science. It is, inside this circle is imagination. There's a family tree of horses, a family tree of eagles, a family tree of potatoes. And that's where it stops. You don't know that they go back to a common ancestor. You're extrapolating way beyond the evidence. I'm sorry. That's not science.
Okay, Jackson, let's hand it over to you. I know there's a
All
point
right.
you wanted to make, and
Yeah,
then
it
let's
kinda
try and
goes-
engage I think the geologic column issue, I think, is a way for us to differentiate between the models, creation and evolution, because Jackson, correct me if I'm wrong, you require the geologic column and all those specific stratigraphic periods and the fossil correlations for common descent. And so, Jackson, feel free to make the point you wanted to or the question you wanted to ask, and then let's kind of engage that topic a little bit.
All right. Well, the point I wanted to make was separate from that. It kind of went back to the feathers argument. So sorry to go backwards, but I just want to show some pictures real quick, if I can share my screen. Let me see. Hang on. Let me remember how to do this. All right, it's showing up.
Yes.
Is that showing up?
Yeah.
Okay. This is
Oh, I think you just accidentally muted yourself, Jackson. Well, I think your computer system might have muted. Okay,
Am I-
looks
am I
like you're
back?
back.
okay.
There you go.
Is it still showing up?
It sounds like you're now using an external mic.
That's weird. Can you hear me at all though?
Yeah, and it sounds a lot
Okay.
better than before. So I think you might have been using your computer mic. Now you're using
Oh,
your
really?
external mic. So
Well, I'm holding it up to
go
my
ahead.
face. I think that's probably the reason.
Okay, go ahead, Jackson.
Okay. Anyway, this is in Wan long, and I think this will kind of solve this argument maybe. This is a 7 foot theropod, clearly, but if you look at its arms, you have something extending out, a few feet. And are you telling me these are collagen fibers or are these pennaceous feathers? And I think the answer is obviously these are feathers. So, and if those aren't feathers, that's not clear enough. This is a smaller dinosaur. This is a Microraptor, but those are clearly feathers.
Well,
And if you
one
look
at
at
a
the
time
skull,
here.
of course, you can see pretty. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Jackson. Kent, go ahead.
You're
stop.
completely missing the obvious. There might have been 6-foot birds, 10-foot birds. Those may be wings. They may be feathers on that creature you found. This is a fossil. You could not prove it had any children. You could not prove it had any children that lived. And you could not prove it had any children that were different. You might have found an animal that's now gone extinct. That's not evidence dinosaurs turned to birds. How can you not see that?
Well, those species are extinct. We know that, but that's really not the point I was making. I was just saying, yes, theropod dinosaurs did have feathers. That's really all I'm showing.
No. Stop. That fossil you found may have had feathers. You don't know that it's a dinosaur. You don't know that it's a theropod dinosaur. Who's classifying this? Who's making the call? Okay. Again,
paleontologists are, I think.
It's dead. It's in the dirt. It's dead. You show me it happening today.
Well, you're not going to like my answer, but have you seen a robin in your yard lately?
Have I seen a robin what?
In your yard lately?
No. Have robins gone extinct? I don't know. Maybe they did.
Well, some bird species have gone extinct, but that's my point is that there's a feathered theropod right there.
The robin in the yard is a feathered theropod.
There you go.
That is your religious belief. That is not science.
Well,
have you seen a potato served? Have you seen a potato served at the restaurant lately?
I have seen that. I have. I had some today, actually.
There's your grandpa. Why did you eat your grandpa?
Well, I'm not sure how it makes sense that it's my grandfather, but he was good.
Great grandfather.
Well,
you believe you're
that
related?
doesn't make sense either. He's alive now. How would he?
Okay, Jackson, do you believe you are related to a potato if you go back billions of generations? Do you believe you were related to
by
a
about
potato?
700 or 800 million years, maybe.
Okay. So yes, you are related distantly to the potato you ate today. Is that what you're saying?
Well, all life on Earth seems to share a common ancestor. So
real simple. Yes, you do believe you related to that potato you ate today, right?
And it was delicious.
Good. Thank you, sir. Donnie, it's been 2 hours. I had to wake up before breakfast. Can I quit? And you guys keep on?
Absolutely, Ken. Typically, that's what we do, brother. I appreciate you giving us 2 hours of your time. 2 hours have flown by. We still got 200 people in the audience. They're loving this. So hopefully, Dr. Dino, we can do this again soon.
Okay. Anytime.
Okay. Thanks for joining us, Kent.
Okay.
Sam and I will stick around for
Kent.
a little bit. I am getting hungry as well. And so I think we'll stick around maybe till the 3 hour mark, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. Sam, you and I have another open mic tomorrow on the Transcendental Trinity for probably another 3 or 4 hours. So we don't want to burn ourselves out. But anyways, to the audience, thank you for joining us for the first 2 hours. It's been a ton of fun. Always love these open mics. Since it is the summer months, July and August, typically we do these evolution open mics once a month, but we'll try and sneak another one in there within the next couple weeks. Okay, so anyways, I guess it's just a bit of a free-for-all right now. I know we've got Brian. Brian, good to see you, brother. We got Merritt. We got Nathan. So maybe they had something to add based on some of the points being discussed and engaged. So feel free to introduce yourselves, bring anything up, and we'll kind of go from there.
Hi, I'm Nathan.
Sorry,
Can you guys hear me okay?
I gotta head out, guys. But it was good talking to you guys. I'll be back around.
Good to see you, Jackson.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming by. Yeah, Nathan, go ahead.
So where?
Oh, now we can't hear you anymore. Yeah, you got no sound, bud. You'll have to try to figure it out.
Nathan,
maybe
your sound went out. We did hear you at first, but then your sound was raptured.
Unless you know sign language, I don't know what we can do.
Okay, you might want to leave the show and then come back, restart it. That might work. Okay, we'll go to Brian now. And Brian, good to have you, brother. You're doing great stuff over on your channel. Brian, I think you're on mute, so let me unmute you.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yep. Yes. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I just had 2 comments in here. I didn't have a question for Kent. The first comment I was going to make was, well, I won't do them in different order than what I was going to do them. But on Jackson, when he showed that image, that was not a theropod dinosaur. It didn't look like a theropod dinosaur at all. A theropod dinosaur was like the T-Rex, the Velociraptor, Carnosaurus, things like that. The dinosaurs with the hollow bones. That was a theropod dinosaur. So I don't know. That looked more like a fossilized bird to me. I don't know what y'all think, but that looked more like a fossilized bird. And they do have fossilized birds in the fossil evidence. But Sam, I really loved your comment on the real issue involved is not the fact that things are changing, not even the amount of change. It's really the kind of change that's being claimed that's the problem. And so we agree that things change over time. Yes. And so I loved your answer on that. I just wanted to let you know that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was really awesome. I really like this discussion. I just jumped in at the last minute apparently, and everything's y'all been going on for like 2 hours. But I think this is awesome because I just got through doing an interview today, or yesterday technically. It's uploaded today with Dr. Jerry Bergman on my channel. So on the fossil evidence actually. So.
Awesome. But, maybe drop a link to that in the chat, and so we can check it out.
All right. I have to see if I know it's was processing last time. It's already done uploaded. I need to see if it's done processing. It doesn't usually take that long to process. I'll check that out, and if I see it up there, I'll come back and drop a link in the chat. But I have to go for right now because I have to go to work soon. So I'll see everybody later, and I will try to check more of this video out later after it's done recording.
Brian, I appreciate you joining us as always, brother. Keep up the good work, and I look forward to our show together next week.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it as well. I'm gonna get ready for it all the rest of this week. All right, bye.
Take care, brother.
Okay, so it looks like we've got Nathan Brooks. Looks like you're back with us. Why don't we try your audio?
Check.
Yes.
It's working.
Sounds like
Yeah,
it's working,
it sounds
Nathan.
good. Other than I have an echo, I put in some headphones thinking that maybe audio from the laptop was interfering. Okay,
Could be.
great. One
You're a
question.
little low. If you want to up your volume a little bit, that might help.
Excellent. Okay. Just one question for Snake. Where are all of the emergent species? How do you deal with evolutionary paradoxes like extinction?
What's an emergent species, and why is extinction a paradox?
Well, according to you, we're all emergent species. It means a new species. Have you
There are
never heard of
speciation events
evolutionary
all the
paradox?
time. And why is extinction a paradox?
Exactly. It creates a paradox for evolution.
No, why is that a paradox? What's paradoxical about it?
Have you had millions of years for all of these species to come about?
Yeah. So what's paradoxical about some of them going extinct?
Yeah.
Are you hearing me? Or
no?
Yeah,
I'm
Nathan,
having an echo. I'm sorry.
Your mic. I think you're having audio problems. Honestly.
Big time. Yes. I don't want to interrupt the show either.
I wanted to ask Snake,
What's
so I'm
the
going to bring a topic.
contradiction?
I'm going to
Sorry.
bring a topic into here, and we'll just kind of go back and forth just to make sure we've got a smooth conversation going. And I hear some background noise or breathing, or almost sounds like someone's snoring. I'm not sure where that's coming from, but
Doing bubble gum or something. What is that?
Okay, I'll just bring something in there, and maybe we'll discuss a little bit more of the adaptability or diversification of life, basically, that we were talking about earlier. Snake, are you familiar with the paper by I gotta see who's making that noise? Just a sec. Okay, I don't know. Maybe it's coming from you, Snake. Maybe there's a bit of an echo. That's fine. Okay, so Feathered Dinosaurs Reconsidered, and it is a creationist technical paper from the International Conference on Creationism. These specific authors, Dr. Matthew McLean, and I think Dr. Marcus Ross was involved in this too a little bit. But anyways, they looked at all these different theropod dinosaurs. They, as creationists, would actually hold to some of these theropod dinosaurs like Sinosauropteryx and Eutyrannus as having true feathers. And they discovered fossil discontinuities within these groups. And so the conclusion of their paper had these theropod dinosaurs not all connected through common descent, but actually existing in separate ancestries. Are you familiar with this paper? And so I guess my point is, whether or not there are feathered dinosaurs, when it comes to the creation versus evolution debate, I would argue that it's agnostic. It's not a way to differentiate the models, mainly because there are some creationists like Dr. Matthew McLean, Dr. Marcus Ross, Todd Wood, so on and so forth. They do hold to the position of feathered dinosaurs, but in their baromenological analyses, they've discovered strong discontinuities and have concluded separate ancestries. Go ahead. What are your thoughts on that?
So I haven't read this, and I don't know what the discontinuities are. Oh, the whole paper's down here somewhere. But you shouldn't expect to have the entire fossil record, one. But so these whoever the authors are concluding that there are fossils of dinosaurs with feathers.
Right. Yeah.
So but their proposal here is that their main point is that birds could not have evolved from land animal ancestors because Genesis clearly states that birds and land animals were created on separate days. That's basically the thrust of their argument, is because Genesis says so.
Right, but in terms of the science, so that they went in with that starting point, that Genesis teaches separate ancestries. And so they predicted discontinuities in the fossil data with these different dinosaurs, some being feathered dinosaurs from their position. And what they found in their analyses were strong discontinuity. So basically, in a nutshell, if you have these fossil groups and you're looking at these different traits in morphology and anatomy, if there's uniformity within that group, then there is, I'm not sure where that echo is coming from. Is that coming from your end, Taylor? It's kind of like
I'm hearing it too.
It's almost like there's another person in the stream that we can't see.
Yeah.
Unless there's somebody, is there someone maybe at your house with you, Taylor?
No, I'm hearing it coming through the stream. It's like rustling, like someone's like has a paper bag or something.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Let's see.
Yeah, it's weird.
I muted my mic for a little while. I
Yeah,
just turned it back
no,
on.
I do see that everybody's basically muted, and so I don't know necessarily where it's coming from. Oh, praise! How is that coming from you, praise? But yet it says you're on mute.
Another paradox.
So
He's
praise.
just so uber Chad.
Praise, can you unmute and then say something?
It's evolution.
Yeah. So apparently, praise has found a way to be on mute, but then have his sound coming through. So let's see if I remove.
Praise, you're gonna have to chew your bubblegum quieter.
I mean dinner.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, with that distraction out of the way, it's weird because he's on mute, but yet I still hear it coming through. And so, okay, yeah, we have these discontinuities in these fossil groups. Basically, we have different species that can be declared, which they do in the paper, as belonging to the same group. But then we have other species that are disconnected due to these traits. And so, anyways, go ahead. But my main point is that this is overall agnostic to the debate of creation versus evolution, because there are some creationists who would hold two feathered dinosaurs. I wouldn't, Sam wouldn't, but for sake of argument, even if there were, we still find strong discontinuities in these fossil species. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, let me just really quick. I think that the word dinosaur itself just adds ambiguity because it has a evolutionary connotation to it. You know, if we don't use that word dinosaur, then we're just talking about kinds that existed in the beginning. And so, you know, was there feathered kinds that existed from the beginning? Sure. It's not a problem. I think when we use that word dinosaur, it's confusing. I mean, we're talking about like a T-Rex now that had feathers on it. Well, I don't think we believe that. So what are we talking about?
How is dinosaur confusing? It's literally just a categorization. It doesn't matter whether they're related to anything or not. Like you can categorize tools as screwdrivers. They're not related, but it's just a suite of diagnostic characteristics. So it's anything that has the diagnostic traits of archosaurs. So basically, it's got that hole in the jaw, like birds have it too. Other skull features, basically generic reptile to sum that up. But also for dinosaurs, reduced fourth and fifth digits on the hand. Foot has 3 main toes, 3 or more vertebrae in the sacrum, an open hip socket joint, as opposed to ours, which are closed. So you can use this definition whether you're assuming evolution or you're assuming creationism or not. It doesn't matter, because mammals, we're mammals, whales are mammals, whether even under the creationists paradigm as well.
But if we're talking about a category called mammals, we wouldn't say that humans live in the ocean. So when we're talking about these things that are called dinosaurs, that's what I mean. It kind of gets a little bit confusing.
How is that confusing? No, the definition of mammal doesn't say living in the ocean.
Well, if we're talking about a whale, we would be, right?
No, but not if we're talking about a whale as a mammal. Mammal is not defined as a living in the ocean. Mammal is a larger category than whale.
Right.
I think classification systematics overall is also agnostic. There's a lot of overlap in the creation versus evolution debate. And classification wise, yes, humans, since we are covered in hair, we're endothermic. Virtually all mammals are endothermic, right? And so, we nurse our young. And so there's many different reasons. There's many different traits that make us or put us in the category of a mammal. The question is, are all mammals related? Now, since we do have these groups within groups patterns in the biological world, take your creature, whatever creature it is, pick your mammal, pick your vertebrate, pick your reptile. Let's take a theropod dinosaur, or even take an extant bird. By definition, that creature is going to have to be closer to another group of creatures and further than other groups of creatures, right? As humans, we're going to be more similar to something and less similar to another thing. It turns out we're most similar to chimpanzees. Primates are all most similar to each other. And so we do have these groups within groups patterns in the biological world. Classification is nice, and taxonomists would actually classify humans as haplorhine primates, if I'm not mistaken. The question is, are all okay, go ahead, Taylor.
It actually doesn't matter whether you say they're related or not. It's just like calling hammers hammers. They're not related. These are screwdrivers. We can classify them as hammers and screwdrivers, and we can also classify them as hand tools. And so the same thing, humans are apes, whether they're related or not. And so, and humans are mammals, whether they're related or not. So so it's not really relevant. There is an argument from the nested hierarchy, but that's not necessarily what I'm going through right now.
Well, let me pick, since we've gone.
But I did want to get back to that the morphological distance paper that you brought up about the dinosaur feathers.
Sure. Okay. We'll cover that, and then I wanted to bring up a specific point as well. So go ahead. We'll finish that one up, and then we'll go from there. Snake, floor is yours.
Yeah, because I did have a response. So that paper that I always bring up, it's a greatest hits, shows basically, yes, there is morphological discontinuity between things, and the pattern that we see is that these gaps get filled in constantly as we discover more fossils. But the point here that kind of goes against what you were saying about the discontinuities in the between the feathered dinosaurs is one that's expected, whether you're creationist or evolutionist, and two, the gaps between things like theropod dinosaurs and the early birds are smaller than the gaps between actual theropod dinosaurs. So you have T-Rex and Microraptor have bigger differences between them than Microraptor has with some of the early birds. So it's kind of a cherry picking. It seems from my cursory glances at that paper that you cited that they're picking the gaps between certain dinosaurs, but ignoring the much smaller gaps between the dinosaurs and the birds.
So I'll respond a couple of ways. Firstly, I prefer genetics to determine ancestry, right? It's in our genes, it's in our genetics, that I believe is the best way to answer this question of ancestry, because it's our genes and traits that are inherited, sperm and egg, not a rock, not a bone. And so I think there's some good from these baromenological analyses through fossil data, but we do know that there oftentimes exists more variation within the same species, as I believe you've pointed out, like Canis domesticus or even Canis lupus. Within that one species, two different ones, obviously, domestic dogs and wolves, we have more variation than across species oftentimes. And this is also the case with the fossil record because we have a lot of diversity in fossil groups. But unfortunately, we don't really have the genetics of a lot of these fossils. So we can determine, okay, all of these domestic dogs go back to a common ancestor, or all the, variety of wolves, coyotes, so on and so forth, have their common ancestors. We can determine this primarily through genetics. In the fossil record, you're mostly dealing with more. I know these studies here that baraminologists have done, they're mostly looking at morphology. They're looking at different traits associated with form and structure. But again, I think that's difficult because of the variation that exists within species than across species. So I think genetics is going to be the best way for us to differentiate between the two models, Snake. And that is why I would look to a series of genetic related arguments, basically, to argue for separate ancestry. And so I'd like to at least present one of those, but I did say a lot there. So go ahead. What's your thoughts or opinion on that?
Yeah, and it's not just morphology; it's also their position relative to each other.
Okay.
That's really informative as well. And but the point about how certain species can diversify sometimes a lot more than their cousins that's kind of the point that I've been making most of the night, is that that within observable within our observations and within the species that you accept are related, there is a higher amount of variation than the variation between some of the proposed evolutionary relatives that mainstream science says. So between bird and Archaeopteryx is a very small difference, even though you guys accept much larger differences in horses, in wolves, in mustelids, which are weasels, otters, badgers, things like that. And the same, and if you just compare a series of these things, there's a small difference between our birds and other birds, small difference between early birds and Archaeopteryx, small difference between Archaeopteryx and other feathered small theropod dinosaurs. But when people like Kent go and say, oh, you think a ladybug turned into an Archaeopteryx? Well, why aren't we comparing stepwise backwards from Archaeopteryx down to I've forgotten the name for bugs and lobsters and crabs and stuff. No. I'll remember it, but they can be traced back. But the point is, you need to compare the closest one each step.
Are you talking about crustaceans or arthropods?
The arthropods, yeah.
Okay.
I was thinking archopod. That's not right.
No worries.
Yeah.
I would respond a few ways. Firstly, the separate ancestry model would understand that some groups, like for example, your felids, there's more DNA differences. There's a greater degree of genetic difference within your felid. So whether you're looking at your house cats, lions, tigers, jaguars, cheetahs, and so on, there's greater genetic difference within that family, who we as creationists would argue belongs to one created kind, than we find in humans and chimpanzees.
Yep.
But yeah, we as separate ancestry proponents, we would argue that humans and chimpanzees aren't related. And so the question is why? And so we understand that, yes, oftentimes that is the case, what you're saying, which is why I think we need to look at discontinuities. But again, discontinuities in fossil groups, I believe, can be deceiving because of that diversity problem. But if we look to the genetic data today, for example, one that I like to look to, simple to understand for the audience and good to engage with the critic, is, and I've got a diagram here, and so I believe this is a way for us to discriminate between the models. And we have Y chromosome data for great ape species. So here we got humans, chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas, and orangutans, 2 different species of orangutan. The Y chromosome is uniparentally inherited DNA, right? It's only passed down on the father's side. So it's paternally inherited. Because it's uniparentally inherited, it's also non-recombining. So there's no recombination that occurs from generation to generation. And so it's basically passed down unbroken. And so every time you get a mutation, you get more branching on a Y chromosome phylogenetic tree. But the point is, it should be relatively more stable. All humans, we have a Y chromosome that's the same, nearly identical, very low uniformity, or it's very uniform. And I would argue we can trace Y chromosomes back to a single Y chromosomal ancestor. But the problem is when we compare the chimpanzee and chimpanzee Y and human Y, we've actually discovered, and according to the common descent model, humans and chimpanzees are related through common ancestry, and chimpanzees are our closest cousin. But Y, if you look at this diagram, notice the human Y versus the chimpanzee Y. They're nothing alike. And when you compare overall architecture, gene content, and size differences, the chimpanzee and human Y chromosomes are only about 35% the same. As a matter of fact, if you look at the human Y and the gorilla Y, they are more similar to each other than either are to the chimpanzee Y. And so I would argue that that is a break in the nested hierarchical pattern that evolutionists oftentimes speak of. Here's the last point I want to make, and then take your time, Snake. So here in a 2020 paper, they've pointed out that their Y chromosomes differ enormously in size and gene content. They argue the chimpanzee Y is only half the size of the human Y. So right off the bat, you're starting with 50%. The percentage of chimpanzee or of gene families shared by, so the gene families are totally different. They say puzzlingly, in terms of shared genes and overall architecture, the human Y is more similar to the gorilla Y, just as I said, than to the chimpanzee Y, even though human and chimpanzee have a more recent common ancestor. And so I would argue this data is far more consistent with the separate ancestry model that says humans are not related to any other form of life, including the chimpanzees. And so this is the kind of discontinuity in genetics that I think we should be looking at rather than fossil continuities or discontinuities. I said a lot there, but it is one topic, and I'd be curious as to your thoughts, Snake.
Yeah, so these that's not actually unexpected, because if you understand that humans did not evolve from chimps and humans and gorillas diverged from each other from some common ancestor. So the common ancestor would have traits that is kind of a synthesis of all those. So what probably happened was that chimps' Y chromosome mutated in a direction that gorilla and human Y chromosome did not. And that's not unexpected at all.
So I would agree. Yeah, according to the evolutionary model, your humans and chimpanzees, one did not come from the other. They share relationship. They have a common ancestor. So you can see here humans and chimpanzees. Chimpanzees and bonobos go back to a common ancestor about 2 million years ago. Humans and chimpanzees go back to a common ancestor about 6 million years ago. And then eventually you get the connection with the gorillas. And so since that split between humans and chimpanzees, basically the chimpanzee lineage has had to change dramatically in that 6 million years. But why in, let's say, 200,000 years, according to the out of Africa evolutionary model, humans have been changing, experiencing mutations, moving to different parts of the globe? Why is there such uniformity in the Y chromosome? Every single human male Y chromosome is still 99.999% the same. Hasn't changed at all, really. There's also no diverging people groups on the globe in terms of the Y chromosome. Very uniform. But then you bring in the chimpanzee, our closest cousin, and then we share a common ancestor apparently with the chimpanzees according to the evolutionary model. It's nothing alike. I mean, to me, this data fits my separate ancestry predictions, because I would argue you have humans, they're their own created kind. Chimpanzees and bonobos, they go back to their own created kind. Gorillas exist as its own created kind. And then your orangutans go back to an orangutan archetype. And the Y chromosome data fits that nicely. And so, Snake, you would have to show us how the Y chromosome can change that dramatically in 6 million years within the chimpanzee lineage. Go ahead.
Well, usually the Y chromosome is one of the fastest mutating chromosomes in lots of different organisms. But I don't have anything about how quickly the mutation rate diverged. But it's not unexpected. Like, it's not preclusionary that chimp Y chromosome has diverged significantly. You would have to quantify that. I don't have data on that right now.
Well, I appreciate those points. I would argue that it is preclusionary. They did not predict the massive differences in Y chromosome. This is from the 2010, I think it is, paper, the original paper on how divergent in structure and gene content the Y chromosomes are. And they say all throughout the paper, when it comes to the gene content, the size differences, the architecture, they use words like, as we can see here, surprisingly, more than 30% of the chimpanzee MSY has sequences no homologous alignable counterpart with the MSY. And so they frequently talk about how surprised they are. It was not predicted. They actually said directly in the paper, this was a shock because this is what was expected in terms of DNA differences between chicken autosomes and human autosomes, which, even according to the evolutionary model, chickens and humans share a very distant common ancestor. And even as late as 2020, in this feedback article, they pointed to a couple possible reasons why we have these massive differences. But they point out that these hypotheses, I've highlighted it here in orange, they need to be evaluated in subsequent studies. And so I find, given the fact that these hypotheses are not yet tested, it's not science, and it's just a story so far, because there hasn't been any mathematical models presented. Again, this data wasn't predicted, and therefore the most parsimonious explanation that obviously the authors of these papers won't conclude is that there exists separate ancestries. Humans and chimpanzees aren't related, as evidenced by the massive dissimilarity in Y chromosomes. Go ahead, take your time.
Can I jump in?
So I had a couple of responses.
Yeah, take your time, no rush.
I'll try to be quick so someone else can get in there. So I don't think creationists specifically predicted the Y would be different between chimps specifically and humans. Just a general prediction of, well, they hope that there is some sort of gap. But the Y chromosome is mostly junk anyway. You don't need one to survive. They're called females of the species. So basically what the Y chromosome is, mostly what it does is just introduce testosterone. So it doesn't actually have to be very complicated. It doesn't have to have a lot of content in it. It can change a lot, which is why it is one of the most quickly evolving of the chromosomes, because you can mess with it. Mutations don't have much of an effect. But so, I mean, I also don't have any quantification on how fast the chimp chromosome is evolving, although I made a quick Google. Maybe we can circle back to that. But I also didn't see any quantification or calculations on your end of why that's actually preclusionary, or that it couldn't have changed that fast, or as fast as it needed to. So I don't understand why that's preclusionary.
Okay, I guess a few points. I would argue that the Y chromosome is entirely necessary. I mean, it's the genetic feature that makes a man a man. I think it's an evolutionary assumption to argue that it's mostly junk. But if it was mostly junk, then why is every single male Y chromosome in terms of humans the same? Because you're saying that the mutation rate is faster in the Y chromosome than in other genetic parts, let's say autosomal DNA or mitochondrial DNA. And the Y chromosome, it does mutate fast. It mutates about 3 per generation. Some say 1, let's say anywhere between 1 and 3. And the evolutionists would argue that humans experienced a bottleneck in Africa, and people left Africa roughly 100 to 200,000 years ago. And so they put Y chromosome atom about 200,000 years ago. And so let's say men, people in general, are spreading to all parts of the globe. A lot of people groups are becoming geographically isolated from each other. And so they would be accumulating their own independent mutations in the Y chromosome. And so if that were happening for 200,000 years, then we shouldn't find such uniformity in the Y chromosome. Yes, the Y chromosome mutates fast. People groups, according to the evolutionist model, have been separated for a couple 100,000 years since out of Africa. So why do we still find low genetic variation in human Y chromosomes if that were the case? There should be a lot more diversity, but there should be a lot more divergence in people groups worldwide. We don't find that to be the case. And then again, we bring in the chimpanzees, and it's only about 35% the same. And I would say it's the evolutionist who has the burden of proof, since you guys are the ones saying that we're related to chimpanzees, to test your various reasons or hypotheses as to why the Y chromosomes are so different. So I've heard they're different because of sperm competition, faster mutation rates. I've heard they're different because faster rates of gene conversion. Okay, but we need those to be tested, not just asserted, but tested for them to be considered science. Go ahead.
Yeah, so unless you have actual numerical data that indicates that chimps could not have diverged that much, it's really not a problem for the evolution side, and there's many more points other than just the Y chromosome. I mean, one of the things about the Y chromosome is that it's full of a lot of tandem repeats. So those aren't really functional parts of it. It's the smallest chromosome by far. And again, it's not necessary for a human to live at all. You can get most of the necessary information that we have is in the X chromosome. And actually, you can have a damaged Y chromosome and still be alive. They're just androgen insensitive women, actually, and they can actually be fertile women even though they have XY chromosomes. So again, I think that you need to provide numerical data on that chimps can't mutate that fast. And of course, it would be great on our end to show that, of course, yes, it can. But if you're making the claim, obviously, if I'm making the claim that it can, I need to provide that data. But if you're making the claim that it can't, you need to provide that data too.
I would argue, and then Sam, I'll hand it to you in one second. I just wanted to say, in terms of the tandem repeats exist in large stretches in the entire biological world. I would argue that they're there for functional reasons as well. The Y chromosome is not that big. I think it's 59 million nucleotides long. We could look at the exact number. The mitochondrial DNA is tiny. It's only like 16,000. And so I would argue that, yeah, everything for the most part of that Y chromosome has to be there for a reason. It's not that big, and yet it has a pretty big role in determining the male, basically.
And I forgot to kind of respond to your question too. So there's not much diversity, relatively speaking, today among humans. But if you compare older human species or older human samples to today, it's a much larger difference.
Here's the last question I want to ask, and then Sam, over to you. I appreciate the back and forth on this, Snake. Is it possible that the reason why the Y chromosomes between humans and chimpanzees are so massively different? Again, only about 35% the same. The Y chromosomes are only half the size. Is it possible that the reason is because humans and chimpanzees are not related?
Possible. Anything's possible. I think that it's highly unlikely given all the other evidence that we have. Of course, just as an isolated feature, yeah, anything's possible.
Okay. And
Is
as
it possible that it could be due to accelerated substitution rates?
Well, again, accelerated substitution rates, sperm competition, because we know chimpanzees exist in polygamous relationships. The male does all sorts of weird things in its mating. Because there is quite a bit of diversity in Y chromosomes within chimpanzees. Still nothing compared to chimpanzees and humans. Faster rates of gene conversion, whatever the explanations, I've read them all in the papers, but they still say, at least as of 2020, that these hypotheses go untested. So I'm just waiting for them to be tested. I am waiting for some mathematical modeling in terms of how these changes, these rearrangements, these massive losses could have occurred in the 6 million years since the split. And so, we'll see. Once that comes about, we'll look at that data and we'll see if it's sound. Snake, feel free to respond to anything there, and then we'll toss it to Sam.
Yeah, I'm looking at a dynamic evolution of great ape Y chromosomes, published in 2020. They're looking at the repeats. They have intrachromosomal contacts, and that there's a lot of multi-copy genes, and kind of what you alluded to was also there was a high sperm competition. So basically what that would mean is that there's high differences between different sperm have different mutations on the Y, and so there would be higher variation between chimps and bonobos, which are also a type of chimp, then experienced between sperm competition with humans. And so with that factor and with other factors, just like the basic structure of the chimp chromosomes, the authors of this paper concluded that chimps experienced accelerated substitution rates. And I'm looking for the actual numerical rate.
If I could, that paper is the one that I screen shared, where they talk about how it's half the size, big surprise, nothing alike. In the commentary article associated with that paper, that's where they say on screen, they say that these reasons that you've provided, they need to be evaluated in subsequent studies.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's basically my point. Yeah, the sperm competition, faster rates of gene substitution, these possible reasons for the massive discrepancy in Y chromosomes needs to be evaluated. We still need some modeling. We need some math. We need some more evidence to back up those stories at this point, is what I would say they are.
I mean, what that would mean basically is like, here's a bunch of possible ones. We don't know if one is the main contributing factor or whether they're equally contributing factors, or whether one is just a non-issue and the others are important. The other one would be elevated gene death rates. So it seems like they're losing a lot more genes than we are due to some of these things. And so they know that they are losing these genes at a higher rate. But the question is why? And these are possibilities, and we'd want to know which one is the main one or what.
So did you just acknowledge like a genomic degradation?
Not in the sense that you're talking about.
Losing genes? Isn't that going the wrong way?
Gene loss is not genetic entropy.
It's not. What is it?
It's gene loss. Genetic entropy is inevitable genetic degradation throughout the entire genome towards non-functionality, no matter what. That's not the same as losing genes.
What happens when you lose too many genes? Are you going to have problems?
Yeah, which is why there's also new genes that come about.
That would be a form of genetic decay.
Yes, but not in the sense that you mean, because it's not genetic entry.
Well, no, I mean it is in the sense that
it's not.
You've acknowledged a gene loss, and gene loss is genetic decay. And
That's not a scientific
if you lose
term.
enough
With these.
genes,
No.
it's going to be catastrophic. And so, is there which that wasn't the question. The question I was. Let me back up, and I know you want to touch on that. That's fine. But I was going to ask you, Donnie, to elaborate, because it seems like I've heard you ask this question that you've posed to Snake. Yet, again, I know this isn't the first time this question's been posed. I've been hearing you ask this question for years now. And so when an element is extremely fast mutating, yet we don't see a lot of mutations on it, I don't know how you can interpret that any other way than being young. I mean, it's not a complicated argument. I definitely can't go as deep as you guys have. I would say that I'm a layperson, but I understand the argument. It's really simple. I don't understand why you didn't get it. So maybe,
right. I would argue that, and you nailed it there, Sam. And obviously, Taylor, we'll throw it back to you after, to be fair. If we have low variation, so for example, here's a Y chromosome phylogenetic tree. Okay. This is a representation of worldwide Y chromosome data. Specifically, Dr. Rob Carter made this tree using worldwide Y chromosomal data. And so there's actually very low variation on this tree. Very few differences. We actually find variable mutation rates as well, because we find in certain groups, we have differing size branches, showing that it is possible and it has occurred that some people in the same amount of time are picking up more mutations than their cousins. And so the mutation rate is variable, but overall what they've discovered, and Taylor pointed this out earlier, the Y chromosome overall mutates quite fast, about 3 mutations per generation. And so with a fast mutation rate, but incredibly low variation, and what I mean by that is every single male Y chromosome, whether you take Y chromosomes from Africa, from Europe, from North America, South America, Australia, they're the same. They're nearly identical. There's no Y chromosome group somewhere in the globe in an isolated population that are vastly different. You'd expect that. You'd expect that to be the case, though, if deep time evolution were true. We don't find that. And so with a fast mutation rate but low variation, the best explanation for that is that the Y chromosome is young. And that way it can mutate fast but still maintain uniformity. But if the Y chromosome is old and it mutates fast, there shouldn't be such uniformity. There should be more diversity and also more divergence in isolated people groups around the globe. Does that make sense? And feel free to respond.
Yeah, no, I don't think we'd expect humans would have different Y chromosomes that different. We would expect them to have much different Y chromosomes to other apes, which we do. And a lot of these mutations are in these huge tandem repeats that are just, it's in the name. It's repeated over and over and over and over again. And these, essentially, most of them don't code for any proteins, so it doesn't change much to have mutations in them. So Sam, to address your point, the ocean is losing water, but it's also gaining more water than it's losing.
Yeah,
so that's
thought,
a problem.
And the difference in the
real quick, I'm going to wrap up.
Well, you're changing the subject
real quick.
I wanted to stay on that really quick. So the question wasn't whether or not there is a loss of function or whatever with these mutations. It's the fact that it's mutating fast. That's the argument. I just feel like you can't leave it away, but that's all right.
So it's not mutating quick enough for us modern humans to all have completely different Y chromosomes. But your point about
it's a fast
entropy,
mutating element, right?
Yeah, but it's not that fast. You're just hearing the word fast and just without any numerical calculation, and you're just saying, well, if it's fast, then it must be as different as I want it to be.
Well, actually, the calculations are going to be either the pedigree, the observable rate, or they're going to be based on your evolutionary, I believe it's a phylogenetic rate, which is just an assumed rate because it is fast. I think that the problem is that it is acknowledged that it is a problem. You're just hand waving it away. But
no, I'm saying
it's something that's been acknowledged, and you guys have created a mutation rate to kind of sweep it under the rug.
I'm saying you need an actual numerical rate instead of just saying it's fast, therefore it's too fast. Because that's all you said is the word fast. That's not scientific or numerical at all.
Well, I used a phylogenetic rate and a pedigree rate as an example. You know what those are, right?
Yeah, so cite the rate that's too fast for what we observe.
Are those scientific terms?
So cite, yeah, I've already said yes. Okay. So cite the rate. So cite the rate that's too fast.
What's the difference between a phylogenetic and a pedigree rate?
That's not the point. The point
that is the point. That actually is the point.
Because you're distracting from the point because you just want to use. We have to stay on point here.
You don't want to answer it?
We have to stay on point here. You need to provide numerical data. The point is you have
a phylogenetic rate and a pedigree rate, and I'm asking you what the difference is between those two.
Nope, that's not the point at all. The point is what the rate is.
Phylogenetic rate at all? Why would you need that? Why don't you just accept the pedigree rate, the observable rate? That is the entire point. Why are you dodging the point?
No, you're dodging the point because I asked you.
You don't want to answer it? That's fine.
Show me the rate. Yeah, you don't want to answer. That's fine. Yeah, you don't want to give me the rate. You don't want to. You don't want to let me finish. You don't want to let me.
Guys, let's make sure we're doing equal time. So I appreciate the passion.
Yeah, I would like equal
Snake,
time.
Finish your thoughts, then Sam, my brother, will throw it back to you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So you have pivoted away from the point which I asked you for, a rate that shows that it's going too fast. You just keep saying it's fast. Show me that rate.
Yeah,
and I did want to address your other thing about genetic entropy, but it seems that we've flown far off track.
So can I answer that now? You want to see the rate? So Donnie showed you that rate. Those were the charts that he showed you. And I brought up the acknowledgement of this word that you're calling fast, that we're both agreeing is fast, and that would be the pedigree mutation rate. And you understand what that is. So I don't know why you're saying that. Well, you're using a word fast and it's unscientific. But Donnie showed you a charts and I referred you to the rate. So I feel like you're being disingenuous there. But that's fine.
Because the question is how fast.
You understand what those rates are, right?
The question is how fast, and you haven't given any
fundamental
answer.
Theorem of natural selection with mutations.
Well, it's about 3. So in the Y chromosome, it's about 3 per generation. In the mitochondrial DNA, it's about 0.5 per generation. And in autosomal nuclear DNA, it's about 100 new mutations per person per generation. So for genetic entropy, it would apply to the entire genome, of course, but mostly to autosomal nuclear DNA, where we have 100 new mutations per person per generation accumulating in populations. But with the Y chromosome, or we could focus on the mitochondrial DNA, it's very similar. If we have a fast mutation rate, we know it's fast because 3 per generation, but then only being separated by a few DNA differences worldwide between any two people. Well, that means it doesn't take a long time to accumulate those differences. And so I can demonstrate this through specifically the mitochondrial DNA. I think it's the least messy, put it that way. And so Snake, feel free to respond, or whoever. This one's a mitochondrial DNA phylogenetic tree of women worldwide. Okay, if you look at the HVR haplogroup, most common in Europe, we have differing size branches. And these branches all go back to a common ancestor. But some branches, you'll notice, differ in size, telling us that some people are picking up more mutations than their cousins in the same amount of time. That tells us the mutation rate I'm hearing some feedback. The mutation rate is variable, but nonetheless, it is overall it's about 0.5 per generation, give or take, depending on the people group or inbreeding, isolation, things like this that could affect the mutation rate. There's only about 25. There's a paper in the secular literature where you can actually look at the Eve consensus sequence, and you can see how many nucleotides on average separate people, any two people. It's about 25, give or take a couple. And so if you have a mutation rate of 0.5 per generation, Snake, how long does it take to generate 25 differences? Not very long. A couple hundred generations max. That's biblical time. But you want to take Eve back, what, 100, 200,000 years? Well, why so few DNA differences? Why not more is the question. Go ahead.
Because we're
But Donny-
also forgetting to factor in the fixation rate as well, which is different than mutation rate. That's a big problem. So you need to answer the question, how fast is too much for the observed distance? And this has to be numerical, Sam, not just it's fast, therefore it's too fast.
Donnie just gave you those
so
numbers.
for mitochondria. And
did you deal with
but
those?
yeah, we also have to factor in the fixation rate.
Okay,
But
well,
I
want to answer the fixation rate. Chris Roop and I, we put out a very detailed article, technical article on this issue: genetic drift, fixation, substitution, so on and so forth. Basic population genetics tells us that the per generation mutation rate over time equals the fixation rate. So if the per generation rate is 0.5 per generation, over time, that is also the fixation rate. And so looking to the fixation rate over the per generation rate doesn't help the evolutionists at all. So here in this paper, yeah, we do see that the pedigree rate, the empirical rate, as in you can take grandmother, mother, and daughter, and you can see how many differences separate them, and you can come up with a mutation rate. And it's fast, firstly, because evolutionists agree it's fast. Notice in this paper from 2022, estimates of the mutation rate with a non-phylogenetic approach, namely pedigree analysis, that's what I'm talking about here when you get grandmothers, mothers, daughters, are reported to be approximately 10-fold higher than phylogenetically derived rates. There's other papers that talk about how this is a rate that's much faster than ever predicted or expected. But the point is, when you manifest DNA diversity worldwide on a phylogenetic tree, you have very low variation. On average, you have just about 25 separating any two people. And so with a mutation rate that's 0.5 per generation, again, over time, your per generation rate equals a fixation rate. This is population genetics 101. You don't have much time to explain these DNA differences. You've got a couple hundred generations, and you still can account for bottlenecks in purifying selection because it doesn't take long to rack up 25 differences. And so again, you can still account for purifying selection. You can account for bottlenecks, genetic drift, so on and so forth. And so that's how we know it's too fast for deep time evolution. It's not too fast for the young Earth creation model, because what we're looking at is a young Earth creation time frame. Go ahead.
So it's actually 0.05 mutations per site per million years in this paper that you cited.
Which paper?
Pedigree-derived mutation rate across the entire mitochondrial genome of the Norfolk Island population.
There's a paper where they've looked at the D loop, the control region of the mitochondrial DNA, and based on extrapolation, they concluded that the mitochondrial mutation rate is about 0.5 per generation. Other papers have concluded it's 0.1, 0.2. And so you can even go with a lower number, and it's still easily explainable in light of the genetic variation. I think that the strongest data in light of the D loop data is about 0.5. Most people don't argue against that. But if you wanted to go with a lower, it's still, it's nothing to explain the roughly 25 differences that separate any two people. Take your time and respond. I want to find the Eve consensus sequence paper to show you what I mean. Go ahead, take your time.
Yeah, so that mutation rate and the fixation rate are different in this paper. And you were saying that the fixation rate is the same as the mutation rate? Because that doesn't make sense, because wouldn't that mean that every mutation that's currently occurring right now is getting fixed?
Over deep time, you have, I can pull up the technical article and I cite a popular population genetics textbook. Basically, in a population that's fairly large, over enough time, you have, through genetic drift, you have a lot of mutations entering the population. Many are not being fixed. Some are being lost, but many are reaching fixation over deep time. And so that's why they argue that the per generation rate equals the fixation rate. And I can find you that quote. I just got to pull up my...
Yeah, I need to look at that paper, because that's actually impossible for every mutation that occurs to become fixed in the population.
Over time, because remember,
because they're occupying the same gene.
Over deep time, you're fixed, because yes, mutations are lost, mutations drift, and they don't all reach fixation. But because you have so many mutations entering the population over enough time, that per generation rate will equal a fixation rate. It sounds counterintuitive, but it is basic population genetics. For us as a creationist, yes, we don't have deep time, right, Snake? But at the flood, we have a bottleneck of 8 people. And then at the Tower of Babel, we have a bottleneck of about 10,000 people. And so during that time period, we would have rapid fixation of new mutations, because we would have a fast mutation rate acting upon a small population. And so you'd have a lot of mutations manifesting and then becoming fixed. And then eventually people spread out to all parts of the globe. And now fixation rates are slower because the population is growing and people are spread out. But I would say during that first 500 years or so after the flood, you'd have the majority of these mutations becoming fixed. And then after the Tower of Babel dispersal, it changes from there. Go ahead.
Yeah, that does. So I'm gonna I have to head out in like a couple minutes, but just send me that. I'll see what you're interpreting there.
Yeah, how about some equal time here?
Yeah, actually, if I could, but before you leave, here's the article I put together. Me and Chris wrote. We had Dr. John Sanford peer review it.
But what were you citing about the fixation rate being the same as the mutation rate?
So right here from Douglas Futuyima, this evolution textbook, he says the neutral theory of molecular evolution holds that although a small minority of mutations in DNA or protein sequences are advantageous and are fixed by natural selection, and although many mutations are disadvantageous and are eliminated by natural selection, the great majority of those mutations that are fixed are effectively neutral with respect to fitness and are fixed by genetic drift. But that's not the specific quote I'm looking for. Go ahead, George.
That's just I have that paper, I think. That's where he compares the evolution rates when you add in beneficial mutations.
Right. Yeah, he's I've got it cited here. Oh, right here. Okay, so he says, since on average it will take this many generations for such mutations to reach fixation, about the same number of neutral mutations should be fixed every generation. The rate of fixation of mutations is theoretically constant and equals the neutral mutation rate. This is the theoretical basis of the molecular clock. And so basically, it sounds counterintuitive, but
what is the name of it, though?
This is just from an introductory level textbook titled Evolution. Christopher Roop owns the textbook, and so he was able to derive the quote. You'd have to look at it online or download it. But here we explain his formula. This is because the fixation of effectively neutral mutations via genetic drift is the underlying cause of the mutational paradox. You'd have to read through this. But basically, your neutral mutation rate, let's say it's 0.5, over enough time equals the fixation rate. Because you have so many mutations in a population. Yes, many are lost, many are drifting, but enough are being fixed that it equals the per generation rate. And so I just recommend reading this article I put out. Go ahead. Yeah, take your time.
So, right, when we measure deep time mutations, we are measuring the fixation rate because we don't know what other mutations are being lost. Is that what you mean?
No, what I mean is whatever your per generation rate is, so let's say it's 0.5, your fixation rate, as in how many of these new mutations are being stuck in place, they're being fixed in the population, it's the same over enough time. That's the way it works out. If the neutral mutation rate is 0.5, the fixation rate is also 0.5.
But that's not what it says there. That says that neutral mutation is the underlying cause of the mutational load paradox.
No, it says that right here, the rate of fixation of mutations is theoretically constant and equals the neutral mutation rate. So he's saying for mutations to reach fixation, about the same number of neutral mutations should be fixed every generation. Because again, you have mutations that have been accumulating for many, many years. In deep time evolution, it's even more years, hundreds of thousands of years. And so, yeah, you have a lot of mutations in this population. And so many are just drifting. They're not being fixed. But many are being lost, but enough are being fixed over time that your per generation rate is the same as your fixation rate. So if it's 0.5 per generation, the neutral mutation rate, 0.5 is being fixed.
So the neutral mutation rate is a small fraction of the actual mutation rate. So yeah, that makes sense.
So if the neutral
total mutation rate is a lot larger than the neutral mutation rate.
Well, right here. So if the effectively neutral mutation rate is 50 per person per generation, then that means 50 nearly neutral mutations will become fixed every generation. So whatever the neutral mutation rate is, that's also how many are becoming fixed every generation.
Yeah, that's much different than just the total mutation rate.
Well, did
we lose Beamsy?
It's a complicated issue, the population genetics point. So we probably lose a lot of the audience on that. Yeah. Feel free to read that technical article Chris Roop and I put out. It's sound. We had Dr. John.
If you link it, I can get it.
Okay, here, let me do it.
And then I was looking for that. I saw Beamsy said, I don't know. I thought this was an open room, but I don't know why he didn't pipe up. He linked something useful. There's variation between Y chromosomes in Australian and European peoples is 5%. So
I clicked that paper. I'll have to read through it. But I want to say this for the audience, for those on the panel. A lot of this is technical, but I think this also is analogous to the Y chromosome. Okay, the Y chromosome, the question is, why are Y chromosomes so dissimilar? The separate ancestry proponent like myself or Sam, we would argue the reason why they're so different is because there exists separate ancestries. Humans and chimpanzees actually don't go back to a common ancestor 6 million years ago. When it comes to the Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA data, let's say mitochondrial DNA, the reason why there's such low variation, a fast mutation rate, is because humans only go back a couple hundred generations and ultimately about 6,000 years to mitochondrial Eve, the mother of us all. And so from there, her mitochondrial DNA was passed on. Mutations have accumulated, formed new branches on the tree. We can back those branches up, back up to the woman of whom we've all descended from, right? And so it's very parsimonious. But I think you guys, Taylor, you have to invoke genetic drift, population bottlenecks, purifying selection, slower mutation rates in the past. It seems like you guys are kind of on the defense on the issue. Well, I know you disagree.
Well,
Go ahead.
all of that's been discovered and demonstrated to exist. But I'm getting a privacy error on your link here. It says you may be trying to steal my credit card information. Is that me? Is that just?
Is it really?
Yeah, that was
Do
me.
I just have my?
I need some money.
Do I have my firewall on too high a setting or something?
Sam's trying to get you.
I just need $20, you know.
In that link I just posted
on
to
you,
the side.
I only trade in crypto and gold.
Oh man! So then you don't even have $20 anymore.
I tried to figure out how to get some crypto.
Yeah.
Just can't devote enough time to it.
Sam, you're tricky. You're sneaky. Sam, any points you wanted to make or add as we kind of start to wind things
No,
down?
I mean that was a good back and forth from both of you guys. So, yeah, that's it.
Taylor, anything you?
All right. Well, thanks for. I like these open mics. So yeah, I try and catch them. I finally caught one this time. So
good.
Taylor, before you leave, please. I finally found this paper I was looking for. You and me are similar. We have 1,000 slides. It's hard to find sometimes the exact paper. So look at this one. This is from Nucleic Acids Research, Eve consensus sequence. And so they looked at 16,569 nucleotides. They found that 84% of the mitochondrial genome is invariant. But here is where you can see what I'm saying. So in this paper, they point out that on average, the mitochondrial DNA differed from, so any person basically on the planet in their mitochondrial DNA differed from the consensus by only about 21 nucleotides, which is pretty. I mean, that's barely anything. I'd argue that doesn't take very long to accumulate, and I would argue that that's biblical time. And so you have a look at that. What they did is analogous to if I handed out 100 books, okay, and told you to copy the 100 books to 100 different people, and each person has to copy the book. Well, each person is going to have their own mistakes. And so if I wanted to derive the original book that I handed out without mistakes, I can examine all 100 books and I can see where the mistakes are. You can take out the mistakes and then you can come basically derive the original book again. And so that's what they did with mitochondrial DNA. They were able to find the variable places, the invariant places, and discovered an Eve consensus sequence. We'd argue that this is Eve's legit mitochondrial DNA sequence. You guys would argue this is a coalesce sequence that probably goes back 100 to 200,000 years. But speak to that if you'd like to before you go. And also, I just recommend checking out that paper.
Well, yeah, I mean, to use your analogy, it would be each person deviates from the original copy a little bit, but each person's copy of that copy might be very different. So that's the difference between, the difference between actual people groups like the Europeans and the Australians, and the difference between those groups and their common ancestor. So they're gonna be more different from each other than they were from the common ancestor.
Well, as mutations accumulate, right, there is going to be divergence, especially more divergence in people groups that are isolated, like Australian Aboriginals, or, if a group in China is isolated from a group in America for hundreds of years, they're both accumulating their own specific mutations, and so they're drifting apart more and more.
So it seems like you should be able to grab any one of those people groups and extrapolate back to that same consensus if we all derived from that same consensus, right? So that would be like a prediction that creation could make.
Gentlemen, I think we're coming on 3.5 hours. I feel bad because the Centurion, you joined, brother. George Bond joined earlier. He didn't get a chance to speak. I apologize. Once we get into that final hour and a half, Sam, it kind of becomes a free-for-all, doesn't it?
It does.
Actually, the whole thing's kind of a free-for-all, but this has been a fun night. Great discussion. I'm glad Taylor joined. Taylor's always fun to talk to because he has a good working knowledge on these topics, and so we can get technical. We've had a great show tonight. Nathan, Centurion, Professing Preterist. Gentlemen, if there's anything you guys wanted to say or add or give your feedback before we wrap things up, go ahead.
Yeah. Donnie and Sam, great to see you. Just real quick, did the pseudo doctor Dino show a picture? Because I was driving home and he looked like he showed a picture that had intestinal organs and stuff like that of his little dinosaurs running around.
I remember him showing pictures of Tyrannus and what he claimed were associated feathers or proto feathers. And then he showed different structures. I think he showed the feet to try and show similarities. I can't remember all the details though. Snake, you unmuted if you wanted to go and elaborate.
Well, no, I don't know what you're referring to, but I was just going to say I'm going to hop off so I don't so my lady doesn't chop my head off. So
yeah, I think me and Sam are in the same boat. So yeah, my pleasure. Feel free to join next time, Taylor. We'll set you up for some debate. So appreciate the discussion.
Yeah, sorry we kind of hogged the mic, but I'll try and make it to the next one so you guys can talk to me as well.
Cool.
All right. See ya.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Yep.
Yeah, because I was just
email me and I'll we'll set something up anytime. So
cool.
All right. Bye.
Yeah, because I wanted to get on earlier and ask him about where he got that picture and how they figure out that these organs existed in the shape and place of these animals, because I didn't think fossils had any evidence of organs.
Yeah, your soft tissues, your organs, lungs, hearts, not
right. That would just be SpongeBob imagination.
They do infer a lot based on when it comes to like the lung systems, when it comes to what's going on in terms of the circulatory systems. There's definitely a lot of inference going on in terms of dinosaur to bird evolution. That's a good point, Centurion, brother.
Yeah. And oh, by the way, I'm a layman when it comes to all this stuff, but because of your book from you and Matt Man and your technical papers, I can read technical papers now. And
awesome.
I'm not, just this is like getting a college education from you. And like I said, the guys that come out and say, well, these are very technical and you wouldn't understand. Yeah, right. I'm understanding a lot that and I can tell when somebody is pulling the BS, not being truthful. In the Marine Corps, we called it a swag.
A swag.
Scientific, a scientific asinine guess.
I'm just glad you're on the same team as us, because you're a Marine Corps young Earth creationist who's now reading technical papers and refuting evolutionism. So, brother, you keep up the good work. That's what it's all about. That's why we do what we do. And
Amen.
Yeah. And we like to utilize just the best scientific arguments for separate ancestry, as I think the audience has seen tonight. I mean, the Y chromosome data, the mitochondrial DNA data, DNA function, molecular clocks, levels of genetic diversity. It's all on the side of the biblical creationists. Isn't that right, Sam?
Yeah. I mean, on one hand, they're technical, but I don't think you have to, understand it really deep to understand the argument. You've got things that are mutating fast, and it doesn't work over deep periods of time. But from a biblical position, where God created Adam and Eve just a few thousand years ago, it just makes sense.
It's like if I were, it's very basic. If I had a paper and I were photocopying it, but the in the photocopy was copying them really fast, and maybe I had a pile over here of like 20 of them, and they came about at the same speed that the photocopier is pumping out new copies, how long does it take to derive, those 10? Not very long. And that's what we see. We got a few DNA differences, but a fast mutation rate. How long does it take to accumulate those differences? Not very long. Biblical time. Like you said, Sam, it's pretty basic. And the evolutionists, they really do struggle with it.
Yeah, and you have been asking that question literally for years. I mean, I've been following you since you've had, I think, just over 1,000, maybe 1,200 subs. So for a while now, and you've been asking that in your old, as far back as you go on your uploads on your channel, you're going to find that question being asked over and over and over again. And I you listen to the debates with Snake, you're going to find that question being asked to him specifically more than once also.
I've been asking that question for about 3 to 4 years of debates. The Y chromosome is a major problem to evolutionary theory. I mean, whoever it is, Gutsy Gibbon, she's attempted to explain it. We responded to her explanation, and she never responded to that explanation. So, it tells me maybe they really do lack an answer, Sam. So you go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, brother.
Yeah, that, and then you've got the mutation accumulation or the genetic decay, which I thought was kind of funny. I think Snake kind of slipped up and
he said
acknowledged gene loss. I mean, come on now. That's going the wrong way for evolution.
Perhaps.
Right.
You need to be picking those genes up, and you got to be building new stuff. If you're going to be you can't just be losing genes all day. But okay.
Well, Sam, you pointed out
you're not really surprised. You're not really surprised that they can't answer this because they're defending the indefensible, and their rescue devices are just that. They're just rescue devices. So while they're trying to bail out the sinking dinghy called evolution with a thimble, you guys are punching holes in it the size of a torpedo.
You don't climb up a mountain by continuously taking steps downward. You have to take some steps upward. And whether it's the Y chromosome, the mitochondrial DNA, autosomal nuclear DNA, we're accumulating mutations. We're going downhill. It's degeneration. Basically, God put us at the top of the mountain, and we've been going downhill ever since. The evolutionists want to say we start at the bottom of Mount Improbable, and we're climbing to the top, but we're never really taking any steps upward. You're never going to climb improbable.
And since mutations are supposed to be their hero of the story, they have yet to come up with a beneficial mutation. Everything they talk about is deleterious. So how do we get a beneficial mutation? And yet they talk about them, but yet they never come up and say, oh, this is a beneficial mutation, or this one's a beneficial mutation. They talk about HIV or sickle cell anemia, because if you have sickle cell anemia, you can't get malaria, and that's beneficial. What?
I'd like to take that back to a point I was trying to make earlier. Can you guys hear me?
Oh, yeah.
It's funny. Centurion, your mic is really loud, and Nathan, your mic is really quiet.
I'm trying this headphone set. Maybe
Go ahead.
A little closer to my mouth. So yeah, if evolutionists have had millions of years for all of these new emergent species, like you and me, where are the rest of them? Why don't we have any in recorded history? Various theories have been proposed to explain why the genetic variants predisposed to death, disease, extinction, schizophrenia. Why they would persist. Where's the fitness? Where's the increase in fitness? They can't show it. It's not there.
Right. We have all the tips of the branches on your phylogenetic trees.
I can't hear anything now.
You can't hear me? That's okay, Nathan. Merritt, I think we're going to start winding things down. No worries. I appreciate those points you made, Nathan. But as we start to wrap things up, Crimson Air, good to have you. Excited for your debate coming up this month. I just put it up on the channel to advertise. And so we'll kind of start wrapping up with some feedback and comments. And I'm not sure how much of this show you listened to, Merritt, but we gave the evolutionary community nearly 3.5 hours. Isn't that right, Sam?
That's right.
To come in. We're in the hot seat. Me, Sam, and Kent. Bring us your best arguments for why we should believe they're related to strawberry. How many people are doing this? Where, we set up these open mics for 4 hours. Anybody in the evolutionary camp can come in and they can engage our points, give us their best evidence. And I don't think we're seeing anything too convincing. But anyways, Merritt, go ahead, brother. What would have been your thoughts overall?
Good evening, guys. Thanks for having me on. I love these evolution panels. I've been wanting to delve more into it. I regret I lost connection just a little while back when you and Taylor were going back and forth about the Y chromosome. I wanted to ask him, although if you know what his position is, then I'll appreciate you filling in for responding to represent his position. He was suggesting that the reason why the Y chromosome in the human population is so homologous as compared to the relative to the chimp Y chromosome. He was saying that suggesting that the fixation rate is different. So I wanted to ask him, why would it be the case that the fixation rate would be different between humans and chimps at a time when the population level of humans around 100 to 150,000 years ago supposedly would have been low enough to the point where any differences in the population count itself would not have made a difference in terms of sheer number. Do you know what was the reason he gave for why the fixation rate would have been different?
I think he would look to the evolutionists would look to different population histories between the human lineage and the chimpanzee lineage. Basically, they argue the chimpanzee within the great ape family is the odd man out. And so that lineage experienced differences in the way they mate, different environments, different fixation events, I guess. Sounds like he was arguing for faster substitution rates. So it's a great analogy. It's a great point. Crimson Air. It's kind of, it's one of those things where they have to invoke a story. That's why I asked for a model. Show me after the split, humans and chimpanzees. You don't really find any fossils. I have an evolution book by Bernard Wood, I think it is, famous paleoanthropologist. He admits that there's more incentive to find fossils in the hominin line, right? The human line. That's where the big bucks and fame is, rather than finding fossils in the chimpanzee line or gorilla line or orangutan line. And so we don't even have a strong representation of the ancestors to chimpanzees in the fossil record. And so there's just a lot of storytelling on what happened historically in their model since the split in the chimpanzee line. And so, yeah, they're okay. He's invoking faster substitution rates, faster rates of gene conversion. It just seems like a whole lot of guessing to me. Does that make sense, Merritt? I'm not sure if I'm speaking to your points as well as I could, but
yes, it does. And I think there's it would be inconsistent to suggest, well, for example, the one variable that would affect the fixation rate would be obviously how beneficial to in terms of biological function a mutation is to the Y chromosome. So say the mutation for the chimp Y chromosome that caused the delineation between humans and chimps and the Y chromosome difference began with a superbly beneficial mutation, and that's what allowed it to overtake the entire population in a short period of time. Then you would expect the exact same thing to happen within the human Y chromosome within a long period of time, where you would get a highly beneficial mutation to the Y chromosome, and that it would take over a large portion of the population, to the point where you have, I think, as you pointed out, that within just 100,000 years, or maybe even less than that, you'd have a huge gap given the mutation rate. And so that's the disconnect that I'd see, and that's what I was hoping to ask to get Taylor's feedback on. But yeah, you have to assume a lot of things, and to me, a lot of it is wishful thinking. We simply don't observe it, and that's why it's reasonable to ask for a mathematical model, at least, to make sense of all of it.
Well, Crimson Air, they ask us when we provide, and then Sam, go ahead after me, and then I think we'll kind of wrap it up. They ask us all the time on the so-called heat problem. You know, how do you explain the heat and radiation resulting or degenerated from, you know, the flood and accelerated decay and stuff? And so we give them, you know, 10 different answers, and then what do they say? Show us the math. Show us the math. And then we ask them about the Y chromosome data, and then they give us a bunch of just so stories, and we say, show us the math. It sounds like they have a double standard. You know what I mean? They want models from us, but then they don't want to provide us the models when it comes to these challenges, you know?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, it seems that they have to have a fast rate, because they have to explain the change. If they're going to want to say that the rate is slow, then how do you get the change?
Yeah. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They need those mutations to accumulate.
That's right.
In order for forward evolution to take place. But then the low variation within these DNA compartments a problem to them.
That's right.
And so they're kind of, you know, they're really stuck between a rock and a hard place in explaining this. And that goes for genetic drift too. Because they want to say, Sam, as you know, they want to argue that, well, genetic drift is going to solve the mutation count paradox, the mutation load paradox. But it's like, no, genetic drift, these mutations that are unselectable, they're subject to genetic drift. And so they drift in the population. Many go to fixation. The ones that go to fixation, you know what that is? It's irreversible genetic damage. Because now it's a deleterious mutation. It's a nearly neutral deleterious mutation that is now stuck in place. It's stuck in the population. It's not going anywhere. That's irreversible genetic damage. Genetic drift doesn't help them at all. It makes the problem worse, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, because then you've got these mutations. You've got them drifting apart into other people groups and then getting fixed in different mutations are getting fixed. So I think that's what you were trying to say to Snake, you know, what were you trying to say? That the numbers are the same. The fixation rate and the mutation rate is the same, because they have to be getting fixed. And, you know, yeah, people are going to be dying off. Some of them are going to be removed, but the majority of them are not, because natural selection is going to select on them. So you're going to have each generation, you're going to have them getting fixed. And even if that line doesn't continue, you only have so many spots where you can have those mutations. So you're going to have them repeated throughout the globe, I guess we'll say. They're going to get fixed.
Well, it's because even if most mutations are lost, there's so many mutations in a large population that many are not. And the many that are not can drift to fixation, which is why the mutation rate is approximately the same as the fixation rate. And it sounds counterintuitive, right? It's like, well, how is that possible? But it's just the case. It's how population genetics works. It's why Chris Roop and I put this technical article out on the topic. Dr. Rob Carter has done a ton on this as well. And a lot of evolutionists, they don't recognize that. Like Dan Stern Cardinal, he likes to say, oh, we're ignoring the substitution rate. It's like the mutation rate over time in a large population equals the fixation rate. It's not helping them at all. It's showing they don't understand population genetics.
Well, yeah, but at the end of the day, they need that change.
Right.
They need those things to be sticking. They need it.
See, you nailed it. They need these mutations Okay, so you got the neutral mutation rate. They need those neutral mutations to drift to fixation in order for evolution to happen. But now they have to argue against that, which means they're arguing against evolutionary change,
right?
Because those mutations that are nearly neutral, that drift to fixation, that results in irreparable damage. You see how it's really bad for them, you know? Now they can't have evolution because they're like, well, no, they won't, you know, it's slow, it's this, it's that. It's not looking good for them. Okay, well, Merritt,
Donnie, I'm gonna jump off here, but just remember that if the atheists and evolutionists didn't have double standards, they'd have no standards at all. So good night, guys. God bless. Thank you for doing this. Again, it's unfortunately I was driving home watching most of it, but yeah, it's still you guys put the scientific smackdown on these evolutionists and atheists. And thank you very much for standing up for God.
I like that. The scientific it's scientific smackdown night on Standing for Truth, hosted by Donny and Sam.
You know, that's what you see me say in chat all the time. You know, atheism is silly. You know, I'm not saying it to be mean. It's just silly.
Sam, that's why I love watching you debate, brother, because you bring the heat. You're great at9-examination. You leave no prisoners. So, okay, Merritt, any final words, final thoughts, my good man?
The last thing I'll say is when the show began, the evolutionists were challenging Ken Hovind, pointing out the certain apparent similarities on the feathers of certain dinosaurs found in rock strata. And I just wanted to give the feedback that appealing to the phenotypical congruencies between species, living or extinct, for evolution is ultimately pointless without being able to substantiate the viability of the mechanism that they purport to be the catalyst for biological diversification. So my question is, what, to their knowledge or opinion, is the minimum beneficial to detrimental mutation ratio necessary for evolutionary advance at the population level? So all we see is an abundance of negative, harmful mutations to beneficial ones. And I even question the beneficial ones because a lot of times they really stretch the line when they want to classify a mutation as being beneficial, when in reality it's when you realize what it actually does, it's quite silly. So all we've ever observed is harmful mutations accumulating vastly more than the beneficial ones. And so they need the beneficial mutations. But then where I see they have a double standard, like you guys just mentioned, is that they are quick to say that the negative mutations are blocked by a low fixation rate, but the beneficial ones are pushed ahead to the top by the same fixation rate. But how do they account for that? And that's why we ask for the mathematical model. And until they provide one, I think our position stands stronger, because what we observe conforms to the creationist model as opposed to random changes making everything better. And that's why the atheist worldview is very much, if not more so, faith-based than the creationist worldview. So I just end with that.
Well,
and
we do have a mathematical model. I mean, that's what Mendel's accountant, that's what that is, right? I mean, you can run your modeling program through Mendel's accountant, and you can see that. And yeah, I would agree with you that they conflate a beneficial mutation with a benefit. You can have a benefit, but it doesn't follow that because you have a benefit that the mutation itself is a beneficial mutation. You see?
That's a good point also.
That's a conflation of two separate things.
True.
Crimsonaire, you'd really love the show I did a couple of weeks ago with Dr. Jerry Bergman. It's titled Mutations. And we go through all of their best so-called mutations and demonstrate that on a genotypic level, when we examine the genetic content of what's going on with these beneficial mutations, it's reductive, functionally compromising to organisms. It's always the reduction or the destruction of pre-existing systems, pre-existing genes, pre-existing proteins being wiped out. And so those kinds of reductive mutations, although in its context might have a benefit, right? Those with sickle cell anemia, okay, they're resistant to malaria. Malaria won't kill them because of the sickle cell gene or disease. But overall, it's due to a broken cell, broken protein, and it's functionally compromising. So those kinds of mutations are not going to counterbalance the damage, like you've said. And beneficial mutation accumulation is rare. It's only about 1 in a million, according to the Budinsky experiment. So finally, you get a beneficial mutation that pops up, and the evolutionists are like, yes, fish to fisherman evolution, here we go. And then you look at the genetic content of what's going on, it's reductive. Yeah. You're losing pre-existing systems. And you know what? Losing pre-existing systems doesn't tell you where those systems came from. Knocking out a pre-existing protein doesn't tell you where that protein came from.
Exactly.
It's not
interesting. I'll definitely check that out. Yeah. So thanks again for having me on. Oh, and by the way, Sam, I enjoyed your debate with Grayson.
Thank you.
I was hoping to see more debates like that. I think that was the first of its kind, right? Debating debating the presuppositionalist perspective, where your debate with Grayson ended on the discussion about rationalism and empiricism, and that debate lasted, I think, close to or just over 2 hours. And so I hope to see a future debate carrying on from that point on forward about rationalism and empiricism.
Yeah. Well, it was extemporaneous, so there's spur of the moment, and I hoped we could have got a little bit further. It seemed like he about halfway through, we were just back at the beginning again, and yeah, it was a little bit frustrating for me, but that's okay. I've asked him to have me on, and so we can have that conversation, kind of pick up where we left off and talk about truth. He's kind of confused there, which is, it all boils down, just like with this conversation. A lot of times I'm going to answer questions differently because they are forced within their worldview to answer these questions and observe the evidence in a certain way. See? It's not a conspiracy like they like to say, all their little cliches they repeat. No, it is a worldview issue. And they have a worldview that will only allow a naturalistic interpretation of the data, and we don't. And so when it comes to, critics talking about an honest understanding of the data, look, we're not cornered. We can explain things naturally and supernaturally, but they're not. See? So there's a lot more to it than I think people see. And these conversations where we're actually debating over the science, I love them. I mean, they're great. But I also like arguing. I can, like I told Grayson or anyone else, I can just grant them their interpretation of the data and then ask them why I should accept it. Why should I accept that? And they have to have a worldview that can make sense of reality. And when you start asking them certain questions about their worldview, you find out really quick that it doesn't make sense of reality. And so that said, anyone who's still listening, tomorrow we're going to be doing an interview with Matt Yester, and we're going to be making a transcendental argument for the Trinity. And so if you enjoyed that conversation that I had with Grayson, wait till you hear this one with Matt. Matt's a solid guy. I've spent literally hours and days and months, I think almost years now, in conversation with him, debating critics on social media apps. So it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. I'll definitely catch it. Love to learn more
And that's
about.
also going to be an open mic. And so Matt Yesser is going to present, and then we're going to open it up like we did tonight. Skeptics, non-skeptics, feel free to join. I'm excited. And we're going to have some impromptu debate. Sam, you and Matt are experts at this topic. So I'll be having a good time sitting back, relaxing, moderating, and watching the showdown take place, brother.
Yeah,
Awesome. I love seeing all discussions that promote critical thinking. That's what this channel is all about. So I appreciate that a lot. So on that note, I would say thanks again for having me on, and wish you all and everyone in the audience a good night, and God bless.
God bless, Merritt. Thank you very much for joining. Appreciate your points. Okay, so it looks like it's just me and Sam. Sam, 4 hours. Doesn't feel like 4 hours. Well, maybe to my neck it feels like 4 hours. But good job tonight. Tons of fun. Right from the beginning, I had a blast. I hope you did. Refuting BioLogos. Kent was on fire tonight. Kent, he is one of the best debaters out there. Always a blast. He knows how to hold his opponent's feet to the fire. So Kent, great job tonight, brother. I look forward to our next open mic on evolution. And Sam, thanks for the time you give us for these shows. Any final words, brother?
Yeah, hey, we're just pointing everyone to Christ, believers. If you've wandered, get back, go back. We're pointing you back to the critics in the chat, wherever you might be. I mean, this is something that you should be taken seriously because, everyone's going to die. Yeah.
Amen. Amen. Eternity is a long time. And so you better make sure you're right. So I'm glad George reminding me. Let me add this to the stream as I'll give a quick shout out before we wind it down. I'm just saving the photo. John Mackay, the creation guy and the creation research team, they are having an event coming up here in Brisbane, Creation Discovery Center. And the creation research team has been a huge blessing. They've been here many times. They are regular guests, a visiting ministry here at Standing for Truth. So it looks like they're going to be touching on quite a bit of stuff. They're going to have some Q&As, talking about dinosaurs, fossils, and footprints. And the days are the 29th and the 30th of July. The time is there as well. And so, yeah, I think that's going to be awesome. My pleasure, George. God bless you. And Sam and I are out. We'll see everybody tomorrow, 8 o'clock, same time. And we'll have another fun night. God bless all.